So I'll declare this meeting of the Regional Strategy and Policy Committee open. First of all, just a housekeeping, the fire evacuation plan for the Town Hall, you go immediately through the doors there, the public doors, through to the stairway, following the exit signs. Don't walk, use the stairs and out onto Aotea Square. That's if there's an evacuation. And people should be reminded that this meeting is recorded on video. It's live video. And so it only applies to people sitting around the table here on the horseshoe and people presenting at the top of the table. So unless you're in that category, you don't have to worry about being videoed during the meeting. So we go to item 1, which is apologies, and there are some apologies.
So we have apologies for the Mayor, Councillor Stewart, Councillor Webb's absence, and for lateness for the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Watts, and for Councillor Cooper earlier departure.
Right, thank you.
And can you add Councillor Watson for lateness?
Right, Councillor Watson as well.
Won't be very late.
I'll move those apologies be received. Seconded by Councillor Penrose. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare it carried. Thank you. Next item is declarations of interest. There have been no...
Item 11, Mr Chairman.
Item 11, Councillor Linda Cooper. Any other declarations? No. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Next item is confirmation of minutes. I'll move that the minutes of the Regional Strategy and Policy Committee of 3 March be confirmed, including the confidential section as a true and correct record. Seconded by Councillor Walker, Wayne Walker. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Declare that motion carried. So now we move to item 4, petitions, and we have one petition, Fluoride Free New Zealand petition. The petition is presented here by Mr. Titchener, Kane Titchener. Mr. Titchener, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
So you have 5 minutes to present the petition, and I'll get the officer to come around and take it from you at the appropriate time, and you can make some comments on explain the petition. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. I've actually handed in the petition and the signatures, and would also like 2 sheets to be distributed, please. Good morning, committee members. Firstly, I would like to thank the committee members, Auckland Council staff and Watercare for taking Fluoride Free New Zealand's advice and guidance from November and reducing the maximum fluoride concentration levels to the US maximum of 0.7 part per million. I would like to specifically thank the Chief Operating Officer, Mr Kimpton, the CEO of Watercare, Mr Jadaram, and Councillor Chris Darby for driving this common sense initiative through.
Thank you.
It is a very large step in the right direction, and you have my sincere thanks. The reduction to 0.7 will actually be a 20% decrease based on the actuals from 2014 of 0.9. Approximately 150 tonne of acid annually will be spared from being added to the shared public water supply. There are operational and compliance cost savings for Watercare. Watercare have been quick to enact the change. I have the last 4 months here of the fluoride readings, and you can see that there's been a steadily trend towards the 0.7. Several fluoridating councils around New Zealand have followed your lead and have recently reduced their target. There is, however, still issues at 0.7. The fluoride being added is still hazardous. Testing has not been done at 0.7 to determine whether it affects learning and memory, i.e. IQ. In December 2015, the US National Toxicology Program Committee met to review a proposal to determine at what level fluoride causes learning and memory loss. At the meeting, Dr. Birnbaum, who was on the panel of the US Health and Human Services that reduced the maximum to 0.7, said the following: "We know nothing, as I said before, about differential susceptibility and vulnerability that occurs within the population." This is from one of the top toxicologists in the world. I'd just like to repeat that statement again. We know nothing, as I said before, about differential susceptibility and vulnerability that occurs within the population. They do not know. If they don't know, the Ministry of Health definitely does not know. The National Toxicology Program are conducting a systematic review of the literature and completing their own studies to determine the level. This could be as low as 0.3 part per million, which means that your 0.7 is way over that. The results are due out in 2018. Babies are receiving 175 times more fluoride with infant formula reconstituted with Auckland's fluoridated tap water compared with breastfed babies. According to the Ministry of Health, 40% of New Zealand children have some form of dental fluorosis. A hypothyroid study from the UK showed a 60% increase in lowered thyroid function in women at 0.7 part per million. There is no individual monitoring for fluoride effects by Auckland Council, Ministry of Health, Water Care. Tooth decay is actually caused by excess sugar. I don't know if you've noticed the campaign to have a sugar tax. Poor diet, a lack of dental hygiene and a lack of access to dental care. Now to the petition. If you see the map of the water network that I've handed out, you will see the Waikato line moves from the Waikato River north. In 2010, Watercare took control of the Franklin Ward water network. Watercare took the initiative to extend the line through fluoridated Pukekohe out west to the 5 townships. These townships were at the time not fluoridated until being connected to the Waikato line in 2014. Now, at the best, the resulting fluoridation has been an oversight by Watercare. I'm happy to give them the benefit of the doubt there, but at the worst, it was a deliberate move to reduce the costs of Watercare's project, less time to consult. Either way, Fluoride Free New Zealand is requesting immediately ceasing adding fluoride chemicals to the water supply of Buckland, Patamahoe, Clarks Beach, Waiau Beach and Glenbrook Beach townships. Immediately advise residents that they have been ingesting fluoride chemicals, consult with the residents in an open, transparent and democratically accountable manner, provide greater transparency and information to all Auckland water consumers. I'm having to write OIAs to get this information each month. I don't see why I should have to do that. Now you may have received guidance that what has happened is legal, but morally you have allowed the initiation of fluoridation without consultation and without notification. Please act on Fluoride Free New Zealand's petition as you have acted to reduce the fluoride levels.
Thank you. I'll move that Mr. Titchener that we receive the petition from Fluoride Free New Zealand and thank Mr. Titchener for his attendance. I'm sorry, I'm not going to have a lot of questions on this because it's not a matter that we're debating today. I'll take 3 questions and that'll be it. So take Councillor Walker, Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Darby.
No, I was simply seconding your
Oh, okay, you'll
motion.
second that. Okay, well, and Councillor Cashmore, that's the 3 questions. Thank you. Councillor Walker.
My question is just around what alternatives you're advocating, Kane. And I guess that applies specifically to these areas that you're bringing to our attention and beyond that.
So in Scotland, they've got what's called the Child Smile program. Okay, so Scotland is not fluoridated, and they actually have a dental program in schools, healthy eating, supervised toothbrushing, and education around that. Controlled dental programs. We know that in particular Māori children who receive dental care have a much lower decayed missing filled teeth rate, and that's what we need to actually focus on. So there's examples of this actually happening in Oneanga. There's a school, a preschool called Te Pāpapa Preschool, and they have actually implemented this program, not off the back of any investigation or guidance from the ADHB, but the preschool manager has actually taken it upon herself to implement this. Healthy eating, sending junk food home, supervised toothbrushings, and she's now going to expand that in April and get the parents involved. And I believe that is the alternative and what we need to focus on.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. Probably a question more of Mr. Kimpton. If there has been fluoride added to a water supply without public consultation, and I don't know whether that's, I'm just taking Mr. Titchener's word at it, I haven't heard from Watercare on this, so what are the legal implications here? What powers does Watercare rely upon to add something to the water supply without maybe consulting the communities that are affected? Are there implications here? Is there something we need to pursue, check up on?
So when we received the email from Elisa Hanson yesterday, I suspect I certainly did, went back to Watercare and asked them this very question. So I think the best thing for me to do is to circulate their opinion, which was prepared by Rob Fisher, but they believe that and they've got legal advice to this effect, they believe that what they've done is within their abilities to do so and within the law. But I'll provide that opinion to you so that you can see it directly from them.
Thank you. Councillor Cashmore.
Yes, thank you, Mr Chair. And further to what Mr Kintim's just said, I also, with Andy Baker, immediately contacted Watercare yesterday, and this is Rob Fisher's reply. In short, water containing fluoride at levels less than the maximum acceptable value comes within the definition of drinking water. Watercare considers it has met all its obligations with regard to the supply of drinking water to the Franklin community at a cost of 116 million. So what people have to understand is that the water quality in Pukekohe and the outer suburbs and the little beachside towns was of not fit for purpose as potable water.
Okay,
And they brought in this system to solve that, and the High Court decision defining drinking water, which was from New Zealand Incorporated and South Taranaki determinations, the High Court in New Zealand, the High Court in New Health New Zealand Inc. and South Taranaki determined that water containing fluoride at level less than the maximum acceptable value will be potable water and come under the definition of drinking water. So that's the legal position for Rob Fisher.
Okay.
I have a follow-up supplementary on that.
No, I'm sorry. We're not debating this. I said that.
I think it is fundamental.
This is questions, Mr Chairman.
I've said already, you didn't.
No,
I
but
think
you
just
can't
walked
do
in
that.
Before. I've made the decision, so I'm going to put the motion.
Is it the intention of Watercare to fluoride the Onehunga supply then on the back of that legal
We're
opinion?
not talking about that, Councillor Darby, so I'm going to put the motion. Those in favour,
Aye.
Suppressed.
No.
declare that carried. Thank you, Mr
Not
Titchener,
receiving the petition.
for your
Are you going to notify the townships?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'll go and have a question, Mr.
I'll now move to,
It's a fundamental problem there.
to
The item's to receive a petition, isn't it?
we now move to item number 5, public input, and we have Robin Hooker. Oh, no. Thank you. You have 5 minutes to present your submission. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui, ngā mihi aroha. I am Robin Holker, recent resident of Mission Bay. I just need to do a brief mihi standing. And I speak to you with regards to the resolution by the Council to revoke the status of the Ngāiho Reserve. I come as a recent resident of Mission Bay and long-time resident of Tamaki Makaurau, and on behalf of many other people deeply concerned about this issue before you. I seek time because I'm very concerned that you would revoke the status of any reserve equalling public land for the use of all in our city, and in particular the Ngāiho Reserve in Mission Bay, and sell it potentially for private use. We moved to Mission Bay nearly 5 years ago, and the decision to purchase our property was based on the view of green across the Norwestern Valley to the Ngāiho Reserve with nikau and exotic palms, willows, cabbage trees, and the bird life that we evidence in those months. Growing up in New Zealand, we also knew that reserves will always be there. Some would argue we're concerned now because we think potential loss of this amenity affects us only. However, I would argue that anyone who feels or experiences any aspect of the environment in any way being affected when change is mooted gives any of us, the right to advocate about this. So rationale and background quickly. Why are reserves important, and what are some of the background issues to this one in particular? History shows that reserves have never been given nor negotiated lightly, and we must never let them go without a long process by which all members of the community have had an opportunity to have their say, including when reserves might appear to be of no particular use or not deemed to be big enough of value. In the ensuing years in the community, we noticed that this particular reserve did not appear to be signposted, and it also appeared to be inaccessible when traverse was attempted. Approaching the council about this nearly 4 years ago, we subsequently managed to get a sign put up which says Nihil Reserve, and it has a little arrow indicating passage down into it. And throughout 2014 and 2015, we were in relatively constant contact, more than 10 emails and many phone calls with the council parks officer to seek assistance to have the sign cleaned, as it was defaced, completely blacked out by paint several times, and also to get guidance as to how we might have this amenity returned for full use by the community, knowing we would likely have to approach our local board, of course, for funding for that. At the same time, other residents were engaged with the proposed subdivision issues arising at 42A Codrington Crescent, and we too advocated in our personal submissions to council that any development should enable the community to gain access, a footpath only, from the top of the Nihil Reserve, which you can see in your documents, out onto Codrington Crescent, currently a large piece of land you can see there. And this was on the basis in theory that any building intensity such as a subdivision requires public land for all to engage with, given the effects of intensity upon communities, especially when a subdivision such as this one being proposed was to be packed very tightly with homes. So it is incomprehensible to us how council correspondence, i.e. mention in any of the few reports such as attached to your agenda today, has failed to inform you as our representatives that such advocacy was going on, while council staff correspondingly worked with Panuki, it appears, since August 2015, advising them they felt there was no interest or no use for this reserve. We have recently requested the documents and background related to this current resolution before you, and as none have been provided by council, we have reason to doubt that such documents exist. And why do we think this? After seeking an urgent meeting with representatives of the Ōrākei Local Board on February the 18th this year, after we discovered the board had approved a resolution for revocation of this reserve, we became seriously concerned that the Ōrākei Board had not received all the facts from council, given we have been attempting to have this reserve tidied up and returned to the community for over 3 years. Clearly none of this information was provided by Parks in their submission. Why not? We doubt there are any documents and reports which provide any analysis of the reserve in its context as a community asset, aside from its history, i.e. the acquisition in the early years, as further to the concerns and a failure to get any further feedback from the Ōrākei Board following the February meeting. We have become aware in the last 48 hours that the Land Contamination Unit in Council has not completed a detailed report, only called Desktop, and further, the Karimarama Mission Bay Residents Association have informed us yesterday that they too were not consulted despite the Ōrākei Local Board minutes of their resolution to agree to revocation on the 5th of November, stating that, and I quote, consultation has taken place with them about the sale of 49 Nihil Crescent Mission Bay. This is untrue. Their minutes also include neighbouring residents were consulted, yet this reserve isn't just about the immediate neighbours, as anyone looking at the topography must have asked themselves who owned the really large piece of land that adjoins the top part of this reserve, and surely those of us who have been advocating for use and access should have been consulted at this time. We'd argue that we are neighbours. Further, their recommendation to support this resolution, and I quote, is based on feedback endorsing Panuki development to dispose of it, but there is no evidence of the feedback. What feedback and from whom? This area is special character, historic character under Auckland City zoning. Nihil Reserve is dedicated plantation reserve to be in keeping with the 2B special character and therefore extends to bush and bird life, which is a key characteristic of the surrounding area. Council recognised in Isthmus B that the zoning is about pattern and density, and I stress mature vegetation, as well as heritage buildings. It appears that in making the decisions about the potential sale or revocation, the decision makers have believed that the reserve terminated in private property. They were not made aware that the current vacant land at 42A Codrington Crescent has easement and grows to council, and this easement is being for access to the council's stormwater retention dam at the southeast corridor of the land, and there's be a handout that will be attached to show you this. Why would they want to sell it to private owners and complicate the need for such easement? Recommendations. One of the important requirements as the intensification of our city continues is that green space and access to walking, cycling and being engaged with our natural surroundings, such as reserves and native bush, is critically important for our well-being and for those of our future generations. With the proposed development and subdivision likely in Codrington Crescent, we would have hoped Council would act as our advocate and would negotiate with this or any developer for this reserve to be tidied up and returned to the community as with a potential pathway out and up towards Keeper Road. In light of the recent reduction in bus services, these issues have become even more important. Further to the Council's own unitary plan.
Mrs Holcomb, you've actually extended the 5 minutes.
Sorry,
So if you could
I will table that there are a number of issues that are reflected, and I would like to lastly add that iwi, we were disappointed to note that iwi have not supported the retention of the reserve and would suggest that possibly they too have not had enough. Lastly, we would ask and urgently ask that you seek more time, more information to consider the complexity of the overlapping aspects of this resolution, much of which does not appear to have been considered nor consulted before you decide to sell it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, for your presentation there. I'm over here.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Mary, got
Sorry.
a peripheral vision. Thank you very much. That's a very good presentation. You mentioned the fact that this strip of land acts as a bit of an ecological corridor for, for bush bird life and nickel palms and whatnot. Just looking at the overview of the streets, and I think you alluded to it in terms of a access point for a number of the residents around here, not just recreational, but perhaps walking to and from various parts. Is that a logical route that people from some of these surrounding streets would take to get to places in the immediate environs?
Yes, absolutely. Nihil Crescent has become increasingly quite a thoroughfare, certainly people dropping down from Kohimarama Road and going to the beach, but the ability to get up to Keeper Road and up to Eastridge, this would make quite a shortcut for people to be able to go up there, because at the moment you have to go right down the bottom of Nihil, turn right and walk all the way up Patterson Avenue. And the bus services, as I said, have recently been reduced.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. So you've had engagement with council officers, and then it was just in February 18 you went to the local board. Did you go to the local board earlier, or it was February 18? And what was the follow-up from the local board back to you after you expressed your concerns, at least on February 18 and possibly prior?
Okay, I haven't alluded in here that we did actually approach, probably about 18 months ago, we did approach the chair of the local board, and his executive support person said that it would be followed up. But I'm a busy person, and people have lots of, we must do something, but actually we sort of rather drop the ball a little bit around that because we didn't hear anything and nothing happened. And so the subsequent to that was finding out that this resolution had gone forward, approaching the board on the 18th and getting a meeting, and we have emailed them, we have asked them, and we have followed up quite a number of times, certainly in the last week, and we have had no reply.
Okay, and just in terms, my second question, in terms of the engagement that has not happened with the Kohi Residents Group, but the report, the original report to the board says that did take place, do you know, and you're confirming that it definitely did not take place? One of the members of the board rang me yesterday when they discovered that I was going to present today, to tell me that having seen those minutes, I needed to know that there had been no consultation with them at all. Okay, and with the neighbours, there's some narrative about
Yep.
in the original report. So there was some engagement with neighbours. Do you know, is this the immediate neighbours or is it the affected community? Do you know how narrow or wide that might have been?
No, I don't, and this has been part of my follow-up and requests and phone calls to a particular person in Parks who I've been dealing with. I then asked, when we found out about the revocation resolution of the board, for all correspondence that had happened to do with the Naiho Reserve, and all I got was copies back of all my emails that I'd kept anyway with this particular person in Parks.
Okay, there's some questions there for later. I'm happy to second. Maybe Councillor Brewer would like to move it.
Councillor Mike Lee.
Yes, thank you very much for this. Can I thank you for going to the trouble. I know all the hassle and concern that people go through when they hear about these sorts of plans by the council. So thank you for your presentation, and I'm sorry that you've been put under stress. In terms of the reserve management, rather than flogging it off, are you saying it could make a suitable walkway or perhaps even a cycle?
Yes, you can enter the reserve area from Naiho Crescent currently, but what has happened is the first 3 or 4 houses, or there's 3 units and then a house, which you can see probably on your topography diagram, they have taken over to some extent the use of the reserve, because obviously there hasn't been any care taken, and entrance down there, including with the park officer 18 months ago, were rather met with what are you doing on our land, but they do know it's a reserve, and so that is a little bit tricky, but the parks people then start to organise for parts of the reserve further up to be cleaned out of ginger and various things, but that hasn't been maintained. I think there's been a little bit of opposition from some of the people who currently are using the reserve. But once you get past those houses, if it's cleared, you definitely could make a really nice pathway up, and then it goes up the hill. And as I argue, they are required to put some access, a road, into 42A Codrington, hence the logic that we community members, people part of this, can see that it would be reasonable to get a small footpath out of the top, because one of the problems with this reserve is that it hasn't been looked after, and that's probably because there hasn't been access. But there's lots of reserves you go into where you can't get out each end, so I'm arguing that you still should be allowed to go into it on behalf of many people.
Because of its intrinsic value.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Potential
very
intrinsic
beautiful
value.
potential.
Thank you.
And Councillor Cashmore.
Councillor Darby covered most of my questions. Robin, it's good to see you again.
Well,
So there's no formed pathway. The vegetation's of limited value because it's been infested with weeds and it's been neglected over the years. Do you have any indications from the local boards who are responsible for parks about their indication of including this into a potential parks budget for it?
no, because that has been the frustration, Bill, about, you know, where to next. And I have copies of emails in October last year. You know, as I said, I'm a busy person. I'm deputy chair of board and another board. I'm, you know, a grandmother. I work. I'm an education consultant. You know, you're doing this in your spare time, and others talk about it, and then you think, I must send another email. So I was in discussion by email about this, asking the person in parks, where could we go now to pull this together to advocate, because I know the process, you have to go to the board and get money to be able to have that put into budget.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Rob.
Right, Councillor Brewer, do you wish to move that we thank Mrs Holcomb?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'll
And
talk to it.
Councillor Darby will second that. So, thank you very much, Mrs Holger. The item will be on pretty soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to the presentation.
Thank you. So I'll now put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare the motion carried. Thank you. We now move to item 6, local board input. Now we have 2 items of local board input. The chair of the Mangere Otahu Local Board, Lydia Sosini, will be here for the item number 11, and the Deputy Chair of the Mangere o Tahuhu Local Board, Carol Elliott, will be here for item 10, and they'll speak when those items come up. So we'll put you on when they come up, which shouldn't be too long, hopefully. So we now move to item 7, extraordinary business. I'm not aware of any extraordinary business. Unless Councillor Philippine.
No, I
okay.
just wanted to acknowledge also there's a member of the local board, Nick Bakulich, there as well. Sorry,
Okay.
Chair, that's all.
Thank you. So notice of motion, there's no notice of motion, so we now come to item number 9, which is reserve revocation and disposal recommendation report. Now, just Mr. Kimpton, there was a question asked, do these, once these matters are dealt with here, do they go back to the Finance Committee or are they finalised?
No, they don't. There's delegation under the delegations of authority for it to be given effect to by Panuku.
Okay, thanks very much. Right, so Councillor Brewer, do you wish to move the first recommendation?
Yes.
Yep. So you move that. I'll second that then.
What's the first recommendation?
Number A, which is Nihil Crescent. So do you wish to, so if you could just ruin your hands, Lydia. Letitia, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to start off with, I'll just briefly go over the nature of this property. The entire property is not actually a reserve. The street fronting part, if you look at it, I've got a picture on page 18 of the agenda, and the property is in 2 lots. Now, lot 1, deposited plan 20245, faces 49 or faces Nihil Crescent. That is not currently a reserve. It was previously a plantation reserve, and the reserve status was revoked several years ago. It is only lot 2, deposited plan 21200, which is the landlocked portion, that is a reserve. Now, I have this property got transferred from Parks through to Panuku in the middle of last year. We ran it through our standard rationalisation process. We weren't aware of the history that had gone on between Ms Hawker and the Parks team. I became aware of that when Ms Hawker contacted me and let me know after she saw a report on the Aoraki local board agenda. I've got copies of the emails here. I last spoke with her on, emailed her on, one moment, on the 18th of February 2016 at 10:16 a.m. she last contacted me and just said thank you for your time yesterday and that she was going to speak with the local board. And she mentioned that there was considerable dialogue with Parks over the past 18 months, but that was the first I was aware of it. So I, at the time, was planning on reporting this item to the Regional Strategy and Policy Committee back in March, and due to that email and concerns raised by Ms Hawker, I withdrew the report and arranged to do some further investigation. Now, the first thing I did was liaise with the local board, who also had concerns because they'd passed a resolution and the issue of easements had come up over at the adjacent property at not Commons Crescent, it is the one at Codrington Crescent. Now, we investigated that, and the local board were very, very concerned that they hadn't been made aware that there was an easement over that related to this property. We investigated and we found out that there is an easement over the Codrington Crescent property, but it's not a public right-of-way easement. It's an easement to give council staff access to a stormwater ponding area, which is on the triangular-shaped property at Commons Crescent. So it's not something that can provide public access. So this doesn't link through. Now, when the board became aware of that, they wanted to investigate some further options. So they did explore if it would be worth actually opening this up as a walkway, and they came to the conclusion that it was not worth pursuing because the costs would outweigh the benefits. It would require acquiring a bit of 42A Codrington Crescent so that it could actually be formed as a complete walkway, and there's also part of the 49 Nihil Crescent site is quite swampy, was the way the Parks portfolio holder in the Aoraki local board described it to me, and it would require a bridge to be formed there. Now, as Ms Hawker mentioned, this is a local board budget issue, and while they think and this was informal feedback from one of the board members, it would be a nice to have. It's not a necessity, and it wouldn't be the highest and best use of their limited budgets. From that, I gave the board the opportunity to rescind their resolution if they no longer wanted their original resolution endorsing the proposed disposal and reserve revocation to stand. They declined that opportunity, and so I'm presenting it here today. Just another couple of things to note. When it does come, and I have explained this to Ms Walker, and again I've got the emails here which I'm happy to share around if anyone wants to see them. Public consultation does take place as part of a reserve revocation process, but that's once council has formed a view. At this stage, council hasn't formed a view because it is up to the governing body to form that view. So I've brought it here today. Based on the decision of the governing body, we will then proceed with the standard reserve revocation process, which includes public consultation as it's set out in the Reserves Act 1977. We haven't undertaken that yet because we're not sure what the official view of council is. We've simply been doing the due diligence, and that's what we've explained to Ms Hawker.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, you have a question of the officer?
Yes, it's a question to Mr Kimpton. When we keep referring to parks, of course this is a parks portfolio for the local board, and I really want to make that distinction because this particular piece has not come before the Auckland Council Parks Committee. And the question I've got to you, Mr Kimpton, is I can understand the board prioritisation, but you are overseeing a really important piece of work which is looking at a comprehensive greenways network for the whole of the Auckland region. So we're in this sort of limbo land between delegations to parks in local boards and the coordination between all of the arms of council to, in a most cost-effective way, create a new network, greenways, cycleways, call them what you like. I just wonder whether, putting that lens on, Mr Kimpton, there has been some consideration given to this issue. I don't want to prolong or have a protracted debate about the merits or otherwise, because I'm familiar with it, but I don't know the detail. But I want to know that it's gone before the officer who is doing this detailed, comprehensive piece of work for the whole of the region, which will come to Auckland Council's Parks Committee.
Sure. I can't answer that definitively. I can undertake to check. Your option, I would suggest, if that is material to making a decision, would be to approve this subject to it not forming a critical part of that Greenways network. That allows us to make progress, and we can give you, we can verify that, because I'm not sure whether I'll find it out in the next 5 minutes.
No, I'm just, therefore, Mr Chairman, I was going to suggest that we defer this until that work was undertaken, but I'm happy to be guided by the proposal by Mr Kimpton.
Kimpton could probably give the Secretary some words and will help.
Yeah, so my recommendation is, just so we make progress, if we're okay with that, that we make it subject to confirmation that this wouldn't sit as part of that Greenways network. I'd be surprised if it did, but let's go and make sure that it doesn't. And we don't know for sure, and I've certainly not asked that question. Others may have taken it into account, but I'll undertake to find out. My recommendation is we proceed subject to.
Thank you. Councillor Brewer. And
well, Mr Chair, before we...
got a question? Or?
Yeah, well, before we send Mr Kimpton off to find out, I wonder if we just reflect on the statement in our agenda. The site was held by the Parks, Sports and Recreation Department, which recently reviewed it and found it was no longer required for a strategic purpose. So I think it's very unlikely that they'll come back and say, oh yes, it is possibly part of our Greenways strategic plan or overview, because they've ruled it out, the department's already ruled it out.
Oh, we can put it in there, it can be checked, double checked.
Okay.
Can I just follow up on that point as well? When I first took this to the Ōrākei Local Board, the informal feedback received during the workshop was this site was actually becoming something of a problem ever since the sign went up. Ms Hawker was correct, it does look very much like private property if you look at some of these photos that I have in here. but when I first went and did a site visit, the sign, there was, just past where the sign is, there was rubbish dumped, and the Ōrākei Local Board were aware that was an ongoing issue. As soon as the sign went up, it was repeatedly defaced. People were using it to dump rubbish there because they suddenly thought it was council property, or realised it was council property and thought, well, council can take care of this rather than us. So it was something that the board were actually mindful of, that was becoming a problem in the community.
Okay, Councillor, question of Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just interested in the process of public notification. Does that take the form of some sort of advert in the local paper or something, or is there some leaflet given round to the neighbourhood? How does that actually occur?
It would be an advert in the local newspaper, and if necessary, a hearings panel would be commenced or convened.
Just in terms of our involvement then, it says if any objections received, they will be referred back to the Regional Strategy and Policy Committee for consideration. But you're saying it's a governing body, in fact. So we make a decision here today, and that then comes back to the governing body for full approval.
If there are issues raised, they would be referred back to the committee.
Okay. So I just simply make the point, Mr. Chair, that in instances such as this, obviously before you make a decision, it'd be very useful to have the view of the local community, because local communities often have a far better understanding than even their local boards of the value of pieces of land in their neighbourhoods, as we've already seen with a couple of instances already this year. So we've had one view of Robin today. I just think it's, in some ways, it's about face, and it's not a criticism, it's the way it's done, but in terms of decision making, that the public are the last person to really be consulted, and their view informs us after we've really made a decision. That seems back to front to me.
And I appreciate your concerns, Councillor Watson, and the reason that we do it this way is because council hasn't officially formed a view yet. Yeah. That's up to the governing body to form a view. So we don't want to be undertaking public consultation when it's essentially Panuku out on its own undertaking consultation on behalf of council without having an official council view formed.
I guess the point is that in some instances with councils anyway, that the views informed a lot by the public view.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, thank God for the Mrs. Hawkers of this world. It appears that there's a developer involved, and the alienation of this reserve.
Councillor Lee, we're asking questions here, please. So we haven't got to the...
Okay. I wanted to okay. I have questions, but I'll wait till...
Okay, we'll put the motion on the floor. Okay, Councillor Darby.
So on that, have there been any approaches to Panuku or any part of council, to your knowledge, wishing to acquire this land? How many? More than one?
I understand there's been more than one, but I'm not sure off the top of my head, sorry.
Does that include the owner of the large site which...
I believe they've expressed an interest, yes.
Did they express that interest prior to us identifying the land as being a possible site for disposal for the reasons of satisfying council's requirement of Panuku to identify such sites?
I believe it was after, and after it had been declared no longer required by the Parks, Sports and Recreation Department.
So you've got the so-called clearance from the Parks Division. Does that include the Stormwater Division?
Yes, we always we consult with Stormwater.
And closed landfills, apparently?
Yes. Actually, and I was on the phone because I had a phone call from the one of the team from the closed landfills and contaminated land team. It must have been at about 5 to 5 last night. Very surprised that she'd been contacted about this property. She had assessed it. All the properties that come here, I have assessments done by the heritage team, the closed landfills and contaminated land team, and also they also go to Stormwater for consideration. She was very, very surprised to be getting a query from the public about this site because there were no issues whatsoever on the property file, and that was the original advice that I received, which I've got here today, and so she was somewhat surprised. So it was referred to as a desktop assessment, but that desktop assessment was referring to the property file, and there were no red flags on there whatsoever. I don't think it would be the best use of resources to go back and have closed landfills and contaminated land, hire an external consultant or undertake further investigation on something where there's absolutely nothing indicating on the property file that there's issues.
Something that we can't see, and I'm not suggesting that we have, more screeds of information, but we can't see the Parks response. So did Parks identify it and assess it from the point of view of it being a plantation reserve as opposed to just another category of reserve? Because I can see from the aerial it is heavily treed, which suggests the plantation reserve status suits. And did the council arborist from that area, being a tree specialist as opposed to a general recreation reserve specialist, did the council arborist report back on the value of the plantation reserve status?
My understanding is all sites which are considered for either acquisition or disposal by the Parks Department are considered in a group form. It's not any one person, so there's a variety of people there. I'm not actually part of that, they come to us afterwards, but there's a variety of relevant staff there who have different skills, expertise, look after different areas, and they form a joint view, and if it's that property is no longer required, then it comes through to us. I'd just like to reiterate again, it's only part of the site that's actually a plantation
I
reserve.
realise. So,
Yeah.
I guess, Chair, I've just wanted to flush this out a little bit. So this is a plantation reserve. It's not a recreation reserve, it's not an open space reserve, it's a plantation reserve. So in the documentation that you received, there is an assessment of it in critical language that refers to the value of it being a plantation reserve and that those values no longer exist and therefore it can be revoked.
It didn't put it in words quite like that. I can actually quickly try and find what we did receive from them, if it's here. Might be.
And then Letitia, while you're just looking there, and you might be able to just answer this one, in terms of engagement with the Koei residents and ratepayers, if that's their name, I mean, we've had them here recently discussing the unitary plan. They seem to be a significant and representative group, and I just take them at their word at that. Was there or was there not any engagement with that group? Or were you expecting another party, e.g. the local board, to engage with that group?
We would have taken advice from the local board if there was someone that they expected us to engage with. They didn't provide any information to us or any requirement that we do so. As I stated before, when it comes to engagement with the community, we will undertake that once council's formed a view. There was no direction from the local board. And I've just quickly found, just back to your earlier question, I found a couple of things. The review by the Parks team said that this is 49 Nihil Crescent is a 10-metre wide corridor of land running south from Nihil Crescent and at its south end branches out to the west towards Codrington Crescent. However, it does not connect with Codrington Crescent. A length of over 20 metres would need to be acquired from the private property at 42A Codrington Crescent in order to complete the connection through to Codrington Crescent. There is no public access track through the land and adjoining properties treat the land as their own. The corridor is mainly covered with mature, exotic and native vegetation and is very weedy in parts. The land drops away from Nihil Crescent down to a stream which crosses the site 84 metres from the road. South of the site, the contour rises steeply towards the southwest. The contours level out somewhat to meet the access to the area about to be developed for housing at 42A Codrington Crescent. The property at 49 Nihil Crescent is a reserve, subject to the Reserves Act 1977, and was considered by the Acquisitions Review Group at their meeting of 26 November 2014. Divestment of the property was supported by the group. Although the connection is not identified As a connection on the draft Ōrākei Local Board Greenways Plan, it is noted that this document is still in draft. So that was what we got from that group. We also have the heritage team review all of our properties. They didn't raise any issues if there have been notable trees or anything like that on there, which they sometimes do, or recommend that the site have some form of survey. And I've also just found the closed landfills and contaminated land summary that we got. Sorry, this involved several properties. In respect of the response of evidence of contamination, there was no evidence of hail activity shown on historic aerial photos. This is a thin vegetated strip of land in a residential area which does not appear to have been used previously, and there is no information to suggest latent liabilities on this property.
Okay. No, I didn't hear the mention of, did they mention plantation reserve, or they just?
They didn't mention plantation reserve.
No such thing under the Reserves Act. It's a plantation reserve. No such thing.
But I'm hearing that referred to in a number of places, so now you've confused me, Councillor.
It was acquired as a plantation reserve in the 1920s. Yeah, so it no longer exists as a plantation reserve as such, but that's...
It meant to sound a bit funny and redundant. It's a local purposes reserve.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Not a
in,
plantation.
yeah.
Thank you. Is that you
But
finished?
clever use of
The
language.
final question is, the neighbours have been consulted. It doesn't say it in this report, it says it in the earlier report, which I gather is that your report, the earlier report?
I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure exactly what that reference was to, and it looks like Ms Hawker's left, so I can't verify that with her. My understanding is that some of the neighbours have expressed an interest with Panuku in purchasing this and various parts of the site, and we've simply given our standard response of this is currently going through council due diligence and taking details, and we'll be in touch, which I wouldn't consider consultation personally.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yeah, just got a few questions. You mentioned that the plantation reserve's about 10 metres wide, correct?
Yes.
And you also mentioned that there are issues around access, and part of 42A would be required. And I'm picking up on the lead that Councillor Fletcher gave about the Greenways plan, which is around linkages and access, and as much and all as it's green, it also goes to transport, walking, cycling, and the like. Apparently we don't have an overall plan, a Greenways plan. I just wonder if Auckland Transport takes any interest in linkages between areas, particularly when we're also trying to encourage people to catch buses and they have to walk to bus stops and the like. And I guess what follows on from this is the possibility, given that you don't necessarily need 10 metres wide, but a walkway could be somewhat narrower, and it might be possible to come to an arrangement with the developer of a neighbouring property through a sale agreement to actually have a walkway developed. I mean, that is the sort of lateral thought that I
Councillor Walker,
would encourage,
you're
Mr Chair.
extending the parameters of this paper. We're not talking, I mean, Auckland Transport have an issue of been to Auckland Transport and talk to them.
May I finish my questioning, sir?
Well, you are covering a lot of ground in leading up to the question, so can you ask the question, please?
So has the part sale of this property been considered to thereby allow access, and that might include a greenway, walking, cycling, access to local bus stop and the like, that kind of thing?
Can I just on your point about Auckland Transport have reviewed the site, as they do with all the properties that go through our rationalisation process. Just yesterday on a completely different property, I was advised by Auckland Transport that they wanted something that we've had purchaser inquiry about, that they wanted it retained as part of a wider network, and they've asked that I transfer that through to them, which will be happening, so they do review these, and that does happen from time to time. In respect of this one, they did review this, and there was no response whatsoever. Now, we can consider various disposal options for the site, including potentially disposing of the entire site to the developer with a condition that it be formed as a walkway, but that could not be progressed until such time as we had a decision of this committee.
Okay, well, through you, Mr. Chair, no response from Auckland Transport, in my view, is not sufficient here. I would suggest that there needs to be a response.
Well, hang on, we're into question,
So
time.
have you sought a response from Auckland Transport further? They just haven't got back to you.
We
Is that
seek expressions of interest from every council department and every CCO about properties going through this process. We only, due to the time involved in actually submitting expressions of interest, we only expect council departments and CCOs to notify us if they are interested. It would be incredibly onerous for staff to have to respond and provide reasons why they're not interested in a property.
Thank you.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, I would just make the point
You got a
that,
question?
yes, is it conceivable that Auckland Transport aren't aware of the possibilities around this?
The officers answered that question, I'm sorry.
Well, no, they haven't, but that's
You're
okay.
just trifling when you kind of
No,
put the
I'm not
question.
trifling,
It's
sir.
the same question that you've already asked in the different truck guys. Mr Wilcox.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, look, when I see Crown, I kind of sends alarm bells up in my spine. So I just want to ask, does the Crown have any residual interest at all in this land?
No, not at all, and we have done the initial stages of just letting DOC know about the site and the potential reserve revocation, and no issues have been raised.
Yeah, okay. And the final one is, in your Maori impact statement and iwi feedback, a lot of the discussion that the response has been regarding commercial interest. Were they also told that this would also involve a revocation of the reserves status?
Yes.
So they were aware of
Yes.
that? Okay,
And this is verbatim feedback, sometimes reduced slightly, but verbatim feedback.
thank you.
Councillor Clow.
Are we on to comments yet?
No, we're on to questions.
Okay, right, well, I thought we might
So
run out of
that
questions.
seems to be the end of the questions. I'll now ask Councillor Brewer, it's on the table.
I can wrap it up, Mr.
You wish
Chair,
to-
as
no.
moved.
Or can I make a comment? Have you finished with the questions?
Do you wish to speak? You have an opening speech.
No,
Okay.
as you always insist, Mr. Chair, I'll have the closing speech.
Councillor Lee, you're first on the list for...
Wait, point of order. I thought he's having the closing speech. Can I have the close speech? Because you gave me the next speaking order.
No, I've got a speaking order
let
already.
Councillor
Councillor Lee,
Clow,
you'll defer to Councillor Clow, will you, Councillor Lee? Okay, that's very nice. You put it in your court then. Thank you.
I mean, he gives up his right to speak.
I just want to bring to the attention of all the councillors, we're about to go through an annual plan process. We still have Panuku have a requirement to raise 67 million a year. It's equivalent to about 5% of our rates. Now, we've got Takapuna and Manukau through Panuku wanting to fence off their sales within their area, and it'd be quite interesting to see what Councillor Darby would do when we start to question all the sell-off of things in Takapuna. So therefore, the 67 million going forward, if we stick to that, is going to have to be raised from the other 18 local boards, effectively. The pressure on those areas to actually compensate if we're to meet those targets is huge. So, the local board says to sell it, iwi says to sell it, pretty well everyone's saying to sell it, and we're going through the hoops here, and that's democracy, but I'm just bringing to everyone's attention, as the Deputy Chair of Finance, that we've got incredible pressures here, and if we're struggling with this, we're going to be struggling with a lot of other properties, and I dare say, as I say, Councillor Darby may not want us to be going through the hoops totally because when anything comes up to be sold in Takapuna, because it may put a cod wash on a whole lot of plans there. So that's just a comment.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, you're in a corner here.
Thank you very much.
Speaker I've got on
Thank you
the
very
list,
much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Mrs Holker for bringing this matter, her concerns, to our attention. Here is a situation, well, for years now, Auckland Council Property Limited and now Development Auckland, Auckland Development, Panuku, has been selling off surplus council property. And by and large, without any challenge at all, I certainly haven't challenged their approvals to sell off council property, apart from the odd property which a local board has identified as important or significant for local purposes. So no issue with Panuku selling off surplus council property. I have a real problem with Panuku selling off publicly owned reserves. And I have to say, with all due respect, I don't see real evidence that this proposal has come about through an objective, strategic assessment of what land, public open space is needed in growing Auckland and what is not. What I understand in reality, the true story is that a developer has approached someone in the council or Panuku about this, and this is in response to an initiative from a developer who stands to benefit from this selling of a public reserve. That really...
Order, Mr Chair.
Order.
I think that's completely opposite to what the officer has told us as to any approach by the private sector.
Councillor Brewer, I don't think that's a point of order. It's a matter for debate, and you've said you're going to have a...
Well, it's a misrepresentation
you're
of what
coming
the
up
officer
next,
said.
so it's not a misrepresentation.
Well, it's complete misrepresentation.
Councillor Lee...
I'm absolutely convinced that Mrs Hawker is an honest person and is telling the truth. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. But what I'm concerned about, Mr Chairman, is when Auckland, in the 1920s, when this subdivision was approved by the Auckland City Council at the time, when the population was about 150,000 people, the subdivision went with the obligation to create a reserve, and in those days when you planted things in reserves they were called a plantation reserve. Under the Reserves Act that name does not exist. It's a local purposes reserve legally. The point is, in the 1920s, when developers sought permission from the council to make money from property development, they were required to put back a public reserve. This is a situation where we are selling a public reserve essentially to a developer that I believe is untenable. It is unfair to the neighbours, and also we are missing out on opportunities to use that land for better purposes in terms of connectivity. In fact, the developer wants to thwart that very process for the developer's own interest, and therefore, in terms of precedent, in terms of what I believe is morally right, the land is owned by the people of Auckland, and what is right for most of the neighbours, I strongly oppose this. It is a thoroughly bad precedent. Once you let Panuku loose on our public reserves, this will just be the start. This will create a precedent, the thin edge of the wedge, and what we're doing here, rather than taking a top-down reassessment of our reserves and holdings and what would be needed for quality of life into the 21st century in a growing Auckland, we are doing this in a piecemeal, ad hoc way with not getting the full story. So I oppose it strongly.
Thank you.
Mr Chair, if I could just make a point
No,
regarding
no,
the
I'm sorry,
proceeds
we're in
of sale.
debate now,
Okay,
Letitia,
okay.
sorry. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Darby? Okay, well, yeah, you're the next.
Thank you.
Because Councillor Brewer says he wants to finish this. Do you wish to speak to?
Just shortly.
No, well, Councillor Darby.
Oh, sorry. Certainly, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So look, I don't support this, members, and I've had some correspondence on this in the last few days. And there's, and I appreciate Councillor Clo's righteous sermon on what I should be doing. But I would like to stress to people, we did not issue an ultimatum to Panuku, and I acknowledge Letitia's work, respect her, all the staff I respect. But we did not issue no holds barred ultimatum to just come and cough up reserves. We didn't. It needs to be tested here. And my questions are a test and other questions are a test. We did not just say, thank you for the report, tick, goodbye, and revocation disposal. I would hope that we do not fall into that area of low engagement here in this chamber, as was suggested. We did not issue a blanket, go get it, go sell it, to Panuku at all. And we're hearing that there are commercial approaches on this. There's some questions about which came first. There is definitely here. And we have seen another one that we voted down, you will recall, up in Forest Hill, where it was a commercial approach. It wasn't really on the list, but to be fair to Panuku, they brought it and alerted us to that the commercial approach came first. And we rejected that one for the quite similar reasons to why I would object. I am objecting to this, is the potential of this reserve. The Ōrākei Local Board, they have supported revocation and disposal, but there are some questions about the residents here, not a well-known residents group not being consulted. Now, I've had it in emails yesterday that they were not consulted. Now, we heeded those residents group when they came in on the unitary plan. We heard them, and today possibly we are not going to hear them. So we heard them on multiple parcels of land, and on 2 parcels we are, some of us may be resisting hearing them. We have also heard that local residents were engaged with, but it was a very narrow band. So I'm also interested in this so-called plantation reserve. It's a very well-treed reserve, and it's maybe not a place to go and kick a ball, but of course we don't have reserves in the local purpose category just to be able to kick a ball or put a playground in. We know that through government changes that the tree rules, our tree rules, have had to change, and we are seeing a depletion of tree canopies all over Auckland. It's plantation reserve in someone's name, but it is a heavily treed, canopied reserve that is holding an ecology which will be at risk. We know that. We know that the tree canopies right across Auckland are being plundered now. And contrary to what Councillor Close said, the iwi did not recommend disposal. Nowhere will you see in the iwi summary here, the iwi feedback, did they support disposal. No such words whatsoever. That feedback is very limited, and most of the iwi are looking at that from the point of view, is there a responsibility of the council, or is this possibly Crown land, or has it got a history whereby it belonged to the Crown, whereby it should be considered as a first right of refusal for cultural or commercial redress. So I look at also the easement and gross, and I know what that easement could be. An easement and gross is for a specific user, that's the council, and a specific purpose, which is to access the stormwater pond. But that easement and gross could be the foundation for further negotiations to get an easement of public access linking through to these 2 parcels and up to Nile. That sort of thing has to be explored. A bit of intelligence, please. And I haven't seen this. No criticism of you, Letitia. It's others that needed to do that work. I think there's a long way to go on this, and I don't recommend that we support the revocation, let alone the disposal, here today.
Thank you. Letitia, there's been questions raised in relation to the process from now on, and the issue in relation to consultation. Now, you indicated that there was adjoining property owners, but it's going to be put out into the public arena through the public notice.
Yes.
So will organisations like the Local Residents and Ratepayers Association and other groups be able to put input into that consultation?
Yes, they will, and we haven't been able to do that yet because council hasn't formed a view yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're waiting for that.
Right, the next speaker is Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Thank you for your report. I mean, I guess when we're looking at these local parks, for me, if the local board have actually tested it and looked at it and gone over that, I think our decision is really around the direction that we've given Panuku to go away and find $40 million a year before 2016, end of 2016, and a wider responsibility to ratepayers, because this money directly takes some of those costs off ratepayers. And I think that's one of the ways. We know we can't keep putting the rates up and up and up. We've got to find other ways to fund what we do. So I think this is part of that, and if the local board are happy, I think I find it somewhat interesting to hear that we've got low engagement. The rest of the people around the table, other than Councillor Darby, have got low engagement. But I've certainly read the report and I'm satisfied with the answers you've given. So I do support this. And at the end of the day, a lot of the people that are saying we shouldn't do this are the very ones that are saying we've got to have more houses in Auckland, and we absolutely do. And I don't really see that we're going to be building a lot of houses on this, but there, if there's that possibility that that large section can do that and provide more homes, well and good. So I do support it in line with the decision council made to direct Panuku to go out and look and find appropriate pieces of land to sell. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Councillor Brewer.
Oh, thank you, Mr Chair, for offering to give me the closing speech on this. The biggest criticism that I often hear around this table about the Aoraki local board is that they never want to sell land, that they want to have their cake and eat it too. And look, just to summarise, the Aoraki local board supports the revocation and the disposal of this land. They've had a workshop on it, and one of the things that came out was not that the property provides little public benefit, but that it has become de facto rubbish tip to a certain extent. It does not, the Hill Crescent does not provide, as we've heard from Letitia, public thoroughfare access, as it has private property at the rear and an easement at the front, as we've heard, for council works access only, not public access. The Sports, Parks and Rec Department, as we've seen in our report and it has been confirmed, has reviewed it and has found that it has no strategic benefit. So I appreciate that we've got that proviso there about confirmation that it's not part of the Greenways project, and I hope that the committee gets a report back on that. But we also have heard what iwi think, what the Heritage Department have thought, what the Stormwater Department have thought. This is price prohibitive, and following up from what Councillor Clow was saying, the cost of making this land useful, or even in part, Councillor Walker, is beyond the local board and is not part of the parks plan, strategic vision. It would require, as Letitia has articulated, not only a walkway but a bridge to be constructed, and the adjacent land would need to be purchased to make it to enable public access. So another thing that we need to remind ourselves of is that the Savage Memorial Park is 2 blocks away. If you do any desktop review of this, that Medill's Farm is 3 to 4 blocks away, that Mission Bay Beach is 2 blocks away, that Keeper Bush is not far away. And so I suppose my conclusion is that often in the last few years
starting with ACPL and now Panuka, this divestments process, is that many of us have tried to follow the lead from the local board and represent and hear them, because they know the area better than anyone, and they know the issues at hand. And so I suppose on this occasion I ask you again to support the local board on this proposed recavation and disposal.
Thank you.
Mr Chairman, I move that the motion now be
No,
put.
well,
That's a procedural motion.
That was the final speech. It was
I saw a few hands go up.
Well, I think it was understood.
I think that was support, wasn't it?
That was going to be the final speech. So, with that, I'll put the motion. Those in sorry?
Division, please. By division.
Are you putting them separately, Mr Chairman?
No, they're both together.
Can you put them separately?
No, they're both together.
Can I see it?
Mr Chairman,
Do for clarification. Just, do you want
a point of clarification, Mr Chairman. I know the vote is underway. I'm very interested to know whether you are going to, how you're going to put them, because I'm looking for that information from Mr Kimpton. So if you could give us some guidance, it would be helpful.
Sorry.
There's two motions.
So they're options, aren't they?
Okay, so I'll take a pragmatic approach to this if I can. The way that I'm recommending you read these two resolutions is that both revocation and potential sale is subject to confirming it's not required as part of the Greenways network. That's simply what I've tried to achieve by putting it in both of them. So if it fails at that test, it fails in both counts. So if it's simply put, I think you can take both together. You wouldn't be intending to revoke reserve status if you weren't also intending to sell, and you're not looking to do either of those if we'll also need it for a greenway. I've contacted Mace Ward on that matter. The person that knows about this is in Wellington today, so they can't get back to me. So the effect of this resolution allows you, should you vote for it, to proceed subject to getting that one piece of information, which I'll make available to you as soon as possible. So that's my recommendation, how you handle this.
Okay, Councillor Casey's asked that it be put in parts.
No, I thought you were putting the whole...
No, this is just
yeah, I don't need it separately.
Nihil Crescent, Mission Bay.
A and B.
So it's A and B, and then C is the Papatoe one. So we'll take the vote.
Councillor Anai?
Aye.
Councillor Brewer?
For.
Councillor Casey?
No.
Councillor Cashmore?
Yes.
Councillor Clow?
Yes.
Councillor Cooper?
For.
Councillor Darby?
Against.
Councillor Filipina?
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher?
For.
Councillor Crum?
For.
Councillor Lee?
No.
Member McDonald?
Aye.
Councillor Penrose? For. Councillor Quacks?
Or.
Councillor Sir John Walker?
Or.
Councillor Wayne Walker?
No.
Councillor Watson?
No.
Member Wilcox?
Yes.
Yes. It's been carried 14-5, so that's been carried. Now we move to the next property is in Burwood Avenue, Papatoe.
Yes, it is, Mr Chair. And very, very briefly, this is a landlocked property that's been encroached on by an adjoining landowner. I'm very sorry I didn't have any other pictures, but I couldn't access it in any way because there's a fence built over the back of the property and there was no driveway access to it. So I didn't want to be climbing over what looked like a residential fence around a section to get a photo of what happens to be council land. But it is currently reserve. It's 349 square metres. As I mentioned, the adjoining landowner is encroached on it, and it was vested in the Papataui Borough Council as road reserve. Again, as a reserve, it would need to go through the reserve revocation process if the disposal is to take place. I'd just like to clarify a point that came up during the debate as well, that proceeds of sale from any reserve in accordance with the Reserves Act 1977 must be used by council to either acquire or maintain existing reserves. So when we are revoking reserves and disposing of reserves that have little public benefit, there is actually a public good outcome that does occur in the proceeds of sale needing to be used towards acquiring or maintaining other reserves. Any questions on 12R Birdwood Avenue?
No questions? Walcott, thank you. Member Walcott?
Looking at I've got a couple of questions. The first one is looking at the adjoining properties. Looks like one property has kind of claimed it.
Yes.
We're not creating a drama for the other one, are we, by flogging it off to one or the other? We think
That would be something that would have to be worked through, and if necessary, the council's enforcement team would have to be brought in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because that's, to me, that's a little bit of a concern that we may be dealing with one side and not the other in that situation.
We would have to work with both landowners.
So we may have to do the Auckland transport thing and split it down the middle. Is that the go?
It would be up to our disposals team to work through the best way under delegations, best way to actually deal with this property. We'd have to take it on the circumstances, and I can only surmise what they may be at the moment.
Yeah, because one of the adjoining landowners is a Māori, so that's why I'm asking that question. Number two, Maori Strategy and Relations Team. Who's that? Did they flag any issue, or did they come back to you? Or
Sorry, just whereabouts?
page 21,
Item 7.
in number 7, internal consultation. Are we talking about the Waka Angamua, or is this another group?
Sorry, I've got the name of the person on the top of my head, but I can't remember the exact name of the department where the owner works.
It's not the Waka.
No.
It's not the Waka Angamua
No,
group.
no.
So we have another group that deal with this, is it?
Sorry, I've just... I'll clarify the exact group when I get back into the office, and I'll send you an email. Sorry, I know exactly the person that we normally deal with, and my mind has literally gone blank on this one. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay, but I would like that clarified, because how many Maori groups have we got in council?
Too many.
So, okay, thank you. Councillor-
That's the end of that.
So look,
As long as our membership
what we're
system-
wondering if that isn't the English translation of Te Waka Angamua.
Yeah.
No, it's not the translation, but the
The equivalent?
I don't know.
Okay, so councillor
It's
Case,
definitely,
Clarify,
sorry, just to
yeah.
clarify, it's definitely not. It's another unit, but I just can't recall the name off the
Okay.
top of my head.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
It's a
Thank you.
new unit.
Sorry, council departments keep changing their names at the moment. Hard to keep up.
councillor Casey.
This isn't being, we're not recommending selling it to the adjoining landowner as part of this recommendation. We're just recommending divestment.
Yeah.
That being the case, how do we get the land for sale unencroached?
We'd have to approach the landowner. In this instance, the person who's currently encroached on the land would be the most likely person to purchase the land, and we have been in contact with them, and they are interested in actually purchasing the land. So that's still a process that needs to be worked through.
It's a process I'm interested in. There are thousands of pieces of land that we own that have been encroached. And it's almost like sitting tenants' rights. You're saying to this person, because you're on it, we're going to sell it to you. Whereas, I think Glenn Wilcox raised the issue of the other adjoining landowner. So shouldn't we have a policy that when we're divesting a piece of land, it's unencroached or unencumbered, or however you want to put it in English?
Well, there's a lot of, and I think Councillor Penrose may back me up on this. There's, in different parts of Auckland, there's a lot of properties that were formed as access ways on reserve that have never been developed, that landowners are encroached on. People have often brought it not realising that they were actually encroached on the land, and they come to council in good faith wanting to legalise a situation, and I don't think as a group would want to be punitive towards those who are trying to legalise a situation where they're illegally encroaching on council land by saying it must be unencroached. I think
Incentivising grabbing parkland.
Order. Councillor Lee, I don't think that was really helpful.
It is, I believe it's incentivising grabbing public parkland.
Councillor Lee.
There's a real problem out there. We need to...
Councillor Lee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
We run these meetings to a standard set of rules under standing orders. And I don't think that means that councillors can just make utter statements at their whim.
Mr. Chairman, was an interjection.
Well, I don't think...
An old democratic tradition.
I think if you continue, well, we'll have to ask you to desist and leave the meeting, because you can't just make utterances like that, please. But anyway,
it's true.
Well, Councillor Casey's got the floor, and if we're going to take value from what you're saying, you've got to respect what the standing orders of the meeting really say. Thank you. Councillor Casey.
I kind of like some, maybe just an opinion from if there's any lawyer in the room with regard to this, because it does seem to me that we're not actually offering it to the market. We're only, if someone's encroached so heavily as this site, then it's not free of encumbrance. Therefore, we can't get the best deal here.
Sorry, if I could just clarify. So there's a couple of points. First of all, sometimes due to the size and shape of a property, it could only be sold to an adjoining landowner. In other instances, it can go to the market. On something of this size, and I believe given the zoning and given the shape of it, it couldn't go on the market. It would need to go to an adjoining landowner just because of the particulars of the site. When we can go to market, we do, but regardless of the outcome, we go through a very robust valuation process so that market price is paid. Just because someone's encroached on land doesn't mean it's gifted to them in any way. Council, as you know, doesn't gift land. There's been several instances where we are asked to do that for a variety of situations. It never happens. That's council's policy. We don't gift land.
Thanks for that answer, but back to my question, which was, it concerns me that because someone is encroached, they have more right to the land than, say, the other property owner on the other side who might also want it, and it was a question raised by Glenn. Well, so I'm interested in whether we are doing this in the best possible way.
No, I think the officer's actually answered that, because she indicated that it would, the other possibility would be for an adjoining landowner to buy it, but she also qualified that by saying that we would want a financial consideration for the sale, and you know, it would mean that we would obviously sell it to get the best price for that bit of land. So, and they're obviously looking at the map, I can see more than one adjoining landowner. So that's where we really are, Councillor Casey. Thank you. You got any other questions?
No, I'm still puzzling over it,
Okay,
George,
well,
to be
we'll
honest.
think- okay, think
It doesn't, we're recommending it for divestment, not for sale to the adjoining owner.
Okay, Councillor Wayne Walker.
I don't think we're allowing that
And,
process.
sorry, just through the chair, I do keep the resolutions as general as possible based on advice from Council's Legal Services Department. If there's very, very specific wording in a resolution, it can sometimes mean that Council's bound by the conditions of that. So, based on legal advice, I keep the resolutions very general.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yeah, just a quick question. The properties each side, 15A and 20, they're both residential properties?
They are.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just a quick question on this matter of encroachment. I didn't realise it was quite as widespread as it appears to be. I know of instances where the encroachments are relatively minor, you know, 15, 20 square metres. In instances such as this, where you've got 350 square metres, is a pretty reasonable size encroachment. And I would suggest in instances such as that, just by the sheer configuration of the sections that are in subdivisions such as this, there's no misunderstanding. People know exactly that they've got land they're not entitled to. Would that be a fair assessment to be make of this particular property?
I couldn't comment on what potential landowners may or may not think of the situation.
So I guess the point I'm making, Mr. Chair, that there's a big difference between someone accidentally or unknowingly having a small amount of land that they were unaware of, and someone who's perhaps been quite calculated and just taking over land. That's an entirely undesirable precedent and a very bad look for council to then to be then disposing of that land to them. I mean, that might not necessarily go to our decision here today, but in terms of public perception, that is not a good look for land that has been acquired illegally and a sizable amount then being offered back to those people for sale.
At a discount.
That's not the way to do it.
Councillor Penrose.
Cronyism.
I just want to say, Mr. Chair, you articulated it perfectly before, Letitia in the past has done an outstanding job in regards to dealing with these matters that's come before us before. And I can say in the South we've had it numerous times, so you articulated it extremely well, Mr. Chair. So
thank you, Councillor Penrose. Look, I'm going to put C and D. They've been moved. Councillor Philippine has moved it, seconded by Councillor Penrose. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
No. Recorded.
Recorded.
Okay, I declare that carried. On the
Record my
voices,
name against, please.
Lee, Casey and Watson require their votes again. Sorry? Okay, we'll have a 5-minute break then, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, councillors.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Letitia. Thank you. These are never simple. Keep your chin up and go on. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, now, thank you. We'll resume the meeting, and we're on to item number 10, which is the Auckland Citizens Bureau Incorporated funding for 2016-2018. And we first of all have presentation from the Mangere Otahu Local Board, and Carol Elliott's going to lead that. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting us come and speak to this. The report, which we'll take as read, that recommends approving the 2016-18 funding to the Auckland Citizens Advice Bureau Incorporated before the current funding and the strategic relationship agreement is renewed and a new one developed. Our local board is very supportive of our local bureaus and would appreciate an understanding of how the current funding and the strategic relationship agreement with ACABS is performing. We would also like to know how we can be involved in developing the new funding and strategic relationship agreement. Our board has always been unconvinced about the one-size-fits-all in the approach to the ACAB Council funding and relationship agreement because of the vast dissimilarity in the way the different bureaus were funded under the old historic Manukau City Council, Auckland Council, Waitakere. We don't believe that local boards, any local board, are really well versed in what is the council's current funding and relationship with ACABS. Local boards don't tend to receive any information from ACABS at all in reporting about what is going on, even though we have very good relationships with our local bureau. So which part of the council is responsible for the analysis and quality of advice to local boards? Who do we go to for this? Local boards do not even have a clear idea on the criteria and process for developing new bureau as Auckland grows. Our experience in Otahu was when we wanted to, for our ward, to have another bureau in Otahu, a very big township which did not have one, was unhelpful to say the least, and our board actually funded the establishment of what we call a suitcase bureau in the new recreation centre at Otahu. We had to initiate the work. It was just a couple of the local volunteers and local board members who initiated this to get this underway, and there is now, as I say, it's called a suitcase, right? But ACABS has not come to the aid of the party about establishing one, where we need it, how to do it. So this is something that we feel is a deficiency. We had to initiate the work to identify the need and feasibility and even fund establishment of the new service. And why does not the funding and relationship agreement cover this? Because with the expansion, for example, in the south, you go out to Flatbush and places like that, you're going to need the more bureau, the more population you have, the more you have. We are the busiest bureau for visitors in the country, in Mangere. The report says that we are, as that is the board's, a primary stakeholder in our local CAB, but we do feel we should be, but we would question if that is the current reality. We want to participate, please, in developing the new funding and strategic relationship agreement, and we ask that this committee looks at having that done before the funding is approved. And we feel that in this way we could look for more accountability of ACABS to the council for the funding that they receive. Thank you.
Thank you. So any questions of Carol? Councillor Filipina.
Just wanted to acknowledge the board, and my question is around, do you know what the position is for the Otara Papatoetoe one with the local board, with the Citizens Advice Bureaus, namely in Papatoetoe and Otara, whether their position is the same as the local board's one in Mangere or Tahuhu?
No, councillor, I cannot answer that.
Maybe I can answer that later when we debate it.
Just in relation to Citizens Advice Bureaus, as you said at the start of your presentation, there was different arrangements in the legacy councils, is that correct?
Yes.
And you're saying now that there needs to be some rationalisation in the arrangement for these organisations across the Auckland region?
Well, the proposal is just for the bulk funding, and ACABs will dish it out.
Yeah.
The problem was the old Manukau City Council, for example, used to pay the managers of the bureaus, the paid managers, and the other ones didn't. And when it came under ACABs, it would have meant a pay cut, and cut in hours and a cut in hourly rate of the managers of the old Manukau City Council properties. And a couple of them, this is where Papataui and Mangere come into this, did not want to go in for that form of funding and have a different arrangement with ACABs. They wanted to be more independent and hire their own manager and all this sort of business. So it's a bit of a mess at the moment, Councillor, and we would love to be able to participate as a local board, along with the other local boards, in developing a complementary and collegial agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Casey, with a question?
It was just to say that CAB used to report regularly to my committee, but because of the negotiations over the contract, they haven't been for quite a while. But I moved to possibly move a B, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, seeking information from the CABX regarding consultation with the 21 local boards, because I'm not at all clear.
There's none.
So
not from we have a consultation with our local CAB officers, but not ACABs.
So I'll see what the chair thinks of that.
And that, Councillor, is why we're talking about accountability.
It would have to be directed to
Staff.
yeah, at ACE, what is it?
I'll take your guidance, but I think we should have a B that
Yeah, I agree with that. That's
hearing
all right.
what you say.
To incorporate the issues that have been
raised by the Mangere
by the
Otahuhu local
Mangere
board
Otahuhu
regarding
local board.
consultation with the 21 local boards.
That may be something that well, whether it probably can't happen. It's going to be difficult to
They
do.
could report back to my committee on it.
Yeah,
It's
but not,
normally-
see, well, you're saying before the end of the year, or?
Oh, yeah.
Before the end of this financial year?
And you'll have some staff talking shortly.
Yeah, okay. Well, we can flesh that out when the staff. Councillor Casey, we'll hear from the staff, and we can finalise the wording once we hear from our staff. How's that? Okay. Okay. Well, with that, Councillor Wayne Walker, you've got a question.
Well, it was just really further to the matter that Councillor Casey has raised, because clearly we need to take an interest in the Citizens Advice Bureau and develop some strategy around the bigger picture. And I'm assuming that that report will be going to Councillor Casey's committee.
Should have gone the ages.
So maybe we'll talk to the officers. So, are there any other questions? I'll move that we thank Carol.
Second.
Thank you.
Lydia and Nick, is it?
Nick.
Nick, for their presentation. Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Fulapina. I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much for that presentation, and we'll wait for your next item. The next item. So we'll do that when we come around to that item. Thanks very much. So we'll now ask the officers to come forward. It's Christine Olsen, who's the Manager of Community Empowerment, and Abigail Vogt.
Where's Carol?
Christine.
Carol, is it?
Carol.
Yeah, hello, Carol. So, well, thank you very much. We're in your hands, but you heard the issues raised by the Mangere Otahuhu local board, and Councillor Casey would like to get something done, something on paper there as a B to the resolution, so we can look at that as post haste, obviously, if it's going to be for the next year. So, yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll take the report as read, and just to summarise, there has been a current strategic relationship agreement and funding agreement with the Auckland CAB Incorporated, which is the umbrella organisation over that umbrellas all the local bureau. So we're in the process of renegotiating that because it expires at the end of June, and so this report is seeking approval for the funding, which was agreed in the long-term plan. Just if I could pick up on some of the points that were raised, our relationship is with the Auckland CAB Incorporated. They encourage local bureau to have a strong relationship with their local boards. So I think what we can do is work through them to possibly get local bureau to encourage a stronger relationship with them and local boards.
Yeah, but the issue that's been raised by the board, and it's kind of equity and fairness, isn't it? Something it is the real kernel of the issue. So, is that something that you can negotiate or talk to them about?
Certainly, so, I mean, they determine their funding process, but we have been working with them as part of the current relationship agreement on looking at a more, their current model is population-based, and we have been working with them to encourage them to look at a deprivation, take deprivation into account in that as well.
Okay, so if we just add to that, raised by the board to achieve greater equity and fairness, taking into consideration environmental issues in the local communities. How's that?
Environmental.
Is that all right, Councillor Cash? Is that kind of...
Environmental come into it.
It's probably not.
It's about deprivation, and therefore it's kind of social issues rather than environmental issues.
Social issues. Sorry, issues in the local community. How's that?
And just what I heard the local board say was that they do have a good relationship with their local people. So it's not about that. It's about the strategic direction of CAB and being involved in that discussion with them.
Making sure that there is good coverage across Auckland with the, I mean, that 1 point, whatever it is not, it's 1.796 million across the, that's an annual, on an annual basis, so obviously it has to be spread out pretty thinly when it gets to the extremities. So with that, are there any other questions? Sorry, Councillor Philippine.
Thank you, Chair. I've been making this an issue since 2012 and also 2013 and also through Kathy's committee. I've been always asking for ACABs to report back to her committee around the issues. So, I mean, just to the officers, I mean, currently what's in place is that the funding is population-based, my understanding, by talking to some of the other CABs, which is a good thing. From some of the ones in South Auckland that I've spoken to. The issue, Chair, is one again from the old legacy, as Carol pointed out, the funding of the managers. They have to now look within the budgets that they have. I think, and I need to put that to the staff in regards to B, is to have a look and to see what the feedback is from the other citizens' advice bureaus in regards to how the relationship is with ACABs. Because in some of the citizens' advice bureaus that I've spoken to, it's that relationship which is the one that is not really, in some of them it's not actually there. So that needs to come back. If there are any issues, that needs to be identified, and then hopefully getting solutions around that. So for me, 2012, 2013, there was a question that I asked whether the relationship with ACAB should continue. And that was the beginning of this term. But as pointed out in the agenda through you, Chair, they're now renegotiating a contract with ACABS through to possibly 2018. So I confirm and endorse what the Māngere or Tāhuhu local board have said, but also want to reiterate that the Otara Papatoetoe local board also share the same concerns. And it is around the equity, so it's good that Kathy's put that in and you've agreed to be part of B. My question, however, to staff is that there's been an ongoing issue around premises and premises that were part of the legacy councils. When this all came to light in 2012 and there was a discussion, the premises at that stage were being paid by council, the maintenance as well. So my question is, moving forward, is that still currently the case, and will that be the case moving through to 2018? Because I know that is a definite concern for 3 of the CABs that we have in the Manukau ward. So can I get a response to that particular question, please, around the premises and the maintenance of?
So through the chair, as we've been returning to renegotiating the strategic relationship agreement and the funding agreement, our colleagues in community facilities have been working around the development of a multi-lease approach with ACAB. So the negotiation has been with Auckland Citizens Advice Bureau Incorporated. There's been a considerable amount of work done, and just in the last week, both our colleagues and Auckland Citizens Advice Bureau Incorporated have come to an agreement both on the area space, what every site and its specifications involved in the lease, and the costings involved, and have also come to agreement around payment and funding. And my understanding, not being the person who's been the officer working in that space, is that everything is covered and inclusive, and a report is currently being prepared to go to all local boards, and all local boards have already been contacted about that report that will be coming shortly.
Okay, Chair, then for me, I think that's one of the key issues that I've been asked to put on the table here. It's around the premises, because the consultation around that is that the CABs have been advised through the community lease that they will have to pay for the premises, they will have to end up paying for the maintenance of those premises, and they're obviously definitely concerned because that eats into the monies that is required to the running of the CAB. So I look forward to the end result of those negotiations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Clow.
The existing 12 bureau are located mostly in the west and south. Can you just tell us where they are located?
Through you, Mr Chair, they range from, no, they're all over Auckland, so they range from Helensville, Wellsford, Albany, etc., all the way down to, in the south there is Botany, Papakura, etc. So the 12 are clusters, and there's actually 32 altogether.
Because I've always thought they do a fantastic job, and I just wonder, you know, there's a report coming back, or there's always reports, but is there a body of work looking, and it would be an LTP thing, so that's 18 months away now or whatever, but is there a body of work coming back that looking into whether this is something we should expand into gaps where there isn't a CAB, or we may have some other alternative facility service occurring there? I mean, is there a body works investigating whether this is the way we should go by maybe replacing some other things? And just because we're going to consultation with the local boards, but I suppose I'd be quite interested in seek information from staff regarding the long-term plan for the provision of CABs and/or alternative services in Greater Auckland. Is that a silly question? Maybe Dean could ask that if it's an LTP thing?
I'm sorry, I was away from this desk just that question was being made. So I can't answer that in fairness to me or you for that matter. But Christine, you might be able to respond.
Thank you. So part of the relationship agreement that we're negotiating currently is to put in place a process of being able to review current locations, and look and the changing population of Auckland, and look to be able to be more responsive to that. So that would potentially involve closing some offices, opening new ones in areas of greater need, that kind of thing.
So I just wonder if the mover and seconder could be willing to put in a couple of words there, would say, seek information from the staff regarding a review of the service after consultation with the 21 local boards. Because all that's really saying is we're going to have a chat to them. It doesn't actually say we're reviewing things, even though it's implied, but sometimes we want to have these things in a resolution. And as I say, when it comes to funding and had any implications, that would be an LTP thing.
It's going to happen, but we put it in there. Okay. Who would move it?
So I think if I can just maybe, we've had issues raised around if we're going to fund, are we satisfied that the way those services are being provided across all of Auckland is meeting the changing needs of Auckland and where real need, as we understand it, lies. Yep. So I think it's probably fair for us to do a review with ACAB to make sure that our expectations, based on the fact that we're a key funder and what the service they're delivering, matches up. And if we've got a difference of opinion, we should out that and then discuss it and agree what we're going to do with that.
Yep.
And part of that would be to consult with local boards to make sure we understand, because they're a key stakeholder in that relationship. So I think it makes sense. We just need to work through now how to give that effect and over what time frame. So maybe we can come back with we'll think about the proposal for making that work. You okay with that, Christine?
Okay, so Mr. Wilcox.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. And the first one regards, I just looked up their website. They've got umpteen number of languages. I don't even see Māori in it. However, the statistics say that Māori are the most likely group of ethnicity or group of people that are to get in trouble with the law or through ignorance of such. So I'm just really concerned that where the bulk of Māori are, mainly in south and west, that they are getting the service, because the $10,000 to each group doesn't cut the mustard when the need is definitely needed in the west and the south. I'm just concerned that we're just going to give a bucket and that's how it's going to go. Do we have any control over how this money is provided?
No.
No, none at all.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at that, Glenn, and
it's
that
with
second
ACABs.
part of the motion will obviously be helpful to review that.
Yeah, because this is a real concern to the statutory board that there's an inequity here, and that money is not being sent to where it's most needed.
Okay.
Thank you.
You got another question?
No, that one.
Okay, you had two, but okay. Councillor Crump.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to back up the comments that Councillor Filipino was making, and I agree inserting review in B, but I think we'll find a review back from ACAB in terms of some of the facility issues, and it certainly is the case in my ward. And speaking of my ward, wonderful to have the Mangere o Tahu local board here, but my understanding is that Onehunga is the busiest branch in Auckland. not to be competitive. Can I just get some clarity, please, on the sequence of the timing, the sequence of the negotiations? So we're here for the funding agreement, but you're in cahoots right now on the relationship agreement. So back 3 years ago, is that the way round? And it was 3 years, and now it's going to be 2 years. So just sequencing and timing and space of negotiations.
So, through the Chair, just to acknowledge that the previous strategic relationship agreement incorporated the funding agreement, so they were held as one document, and that's, at the moment, as we develop the funding agreement, it too will sit as part of the strategic relationship agreement. In terms of the timing, the proposal currently is to make sure that the agreements work with council funding cycles. So the proposal is to respond to the long-term plan and to have the strategic relationship agreement and funding with that for a 2-year period now, looking towards +3, dependent on decisions made. Does that answer all of your questions?
Yeah, no, it does. So it's just a functional sequencing by us for the LTP cycle. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Councillor Quacks.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I may be a little bit off topic, and I'm sure you'll tell me if I am. But just want to acknowledge the AMP Capital for their generous contribution to giving space for the botany CAB. They've given some office space in that area, and just want to acknowledge their contribution to this organisation.
Thank you. And Councillor Casey. Now, you're going to move this, Councillor Casey.
Yeah, I'll move it. I also just wanted to let everybody know the next meeting of the Community Development and Safety Committee is on the theme of the social consequences of intensification. And it might be quite a good opportunity for CABX to come along and tell us about their strategic plan so that we're at least up to the minute with them. So I would suggest that that invitation is extended.
Okay, so Councillor Casey moves it. Councillor Crum seconded it. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Thank you very much. I wonder what you've stepped into here, Christine. Thank you very much.
Oh, no, that's unfair.
Then we now move to item 11, District Licensing Committee. Conflict. Okay, so we have officers here for this item. Richard, come forward now. Oh, no, sorry, we got the local board. Yeah, sorry. We'll have, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself there. So, welcome back to... Right, Carol?
Yes, it's just his computer case.
She's been drinking.
I should be so lucky.
Health and safety, Mr. Chairman.
We've got
Secure all cables.
We've got all that covered here, Councillor Brewer. Just don't worry about it.
I'm more responsible. I'll be in jail.
Okay, so Lydia, we're in your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this item once again. I do bring apologies of Chair Whana Fessel Collins, who couldn't be here. However, we are here today to just speak very briefly regarding this item. Committee members, we just have one slide, and it's really just to stress our point. And so I take the report as read by the committee members, and in terms of the selection of the panel, we would want to stress that the panel reflect a cross-section of cultural diversity and communities of Auckland. And through the chair, our boards, particularly Mangere Otahuhu and Otara Papatoetoe, appreciate the consideration given so far to our inputs and feedback. You'll be well aware of the harmful impact of proliferation of alcohol supply in our local communities, particularly in the south, as major concern to our boards. Criteria for selecting the DRC committee is very important, and the panel's expertise, competence and understanding of local communities is crucial to how it performs its duties, and we say this based on direct experience and knowledge. We strongly recommend that the criteria include the panel to reflect a cross-section of cultural diversity and communities of Auckland, and you may appreciate that we've had a concern as currently there are no representatives from the southern areas of Auckland. In the report that is before you, committee members, there are options that have been given. Our second point that we want to make today, before you in the report, staff are recommending that option 3 be considered by this committee. We, on the other hand, are strongly supporting option 2. We request that the council committee consider this. This will or may allow for putting in place a DLC that meets the criteria set without further delay. The experience and knowledge gathered through the work currently and to date on this topic so far is utilised in time without losing the momentum. And we as a board say this, Chair, as you can appreciate, in terms of the practical realities and challenges in our local communities, in terms of timely response and action. And the rate of request for liquor licence will not slow down in this time period. And thank you for the opportunity, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Otahu Local Board? No questions? We thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move that we thank the Chair, Lydia Sassini, sorry, did you have, and seconded by Councillor Fletcher, for their for appearing here this morning. I'll move that. Those in favour? Against? I'll declare that carried. Thank you. Now we have
I'll leave it to you.
Elizabeth Mackenzie, Marguerite Delme and James Hassel. Thank you very much for being here. I think you'll be well known to all the councillors around the table here. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. So this report came as a result of a report that we presented to the Hearings Committee on the 15th of March. In that report, we were proposing a recruitment process for the new DLC. And our proposal was to establish a selection panel that would have senior staff and members in the AMSB to proceed with the recruitment of a new DLC by October 2016. The Hearings Committee asked us to go back to the drawing board and look at other options, which would involve elected members being part of the selection panel, and or would look at deferring the recruitment process until after the elections. So we've developed, and the reason why we're coming back to you with this report is the decision that this committee had made in June was that the recruitment process take place for October 2016. So we've developed different options. There are 3 options that we could think of that would all be feasible. The first one is that we proceed with the original time frame, i.e. we proceed in time to have a new DLC in place by October 2016, but just with staff member, which we acknowledge might not meet the requirements of some of you. The second one was to stick to the original time frame and involve elected members in the recruitment process. And we are very happy to proceed with that option. From our perspective, it would actually probably be the best one, but we're very aware that the timing is such that it's going to be a very busy period for elected members just before the elections. And the third option is that we basically delay the recruitment until after the elections, so we would come back to an equivalent committee to this one in the new term with the recruitment process, and we could involve elected members in the recruitment process at that stage. We would, for this, need to extend the contracts of our current DLC members so that they can continue to work under the current structure until we recruit the new DLC. We have canvassed the views of our existing DLC members, and all but 2 would be prepared to have their contracts extended. So practically, from a staff perspective, create a little bit of a bottleneck because we would have the recruitment of independent hearings commissioner taking place at the same time. But we'll have to work around this and make it work by staging those recruitment processes.
Thank you. All right, so it's a process. Councillor Filipino.
Just wanted to see, as a result of the presentation from the local board around the competencies and adding the cultural one, I'll be interested to see what your response would be.
So one of the comments that the hearings committee made to us when we presented was we didn't have any criteria. We were going to ask for approval for a process. So as a result, we did develop the draft criteria that we thought would be appropriate. This is not a final list, and we're not asking you to approve it today. We would be very happy to consider the criteria that the local board is proposing. However, I would, in effect, it's going to be difficult to, but there's a certain element of subjectivity in it, and how we ensure that cross-section representation. We need to work on how we refine that criteria and just making sure that we've got 15 members in total. We're proposing 15 members in total, 5 chairs and 10 DLC members. And so how we give effect to that criteria effectively would require a little bit of work. So I would, but I'd be very happy to work with them on how we can make it work, acknowledging the ongoing concerns that they have had about DLC members, understanding the realities of the communities in which they make the decisions.
So, Chair,
Can we add a D?
Yeah, I was going to just ask for your guidance in regards to that, Chair, because as what's been explained, there needs to be some work, but as long as it doesn't get missed out, so...
Yeah, okay, we'll add a D saying that we note we note the submission of the
2 local boards.
Yeah, the 2 local, Mangere, Otahu and Otara
Papatoetoe. Yeah, around the criteria at least. And I think the best thing, through you, Chair, is at least once that has happened, that a response goes back to those 2, but also to others who may end up looking at this recommendation saying, hey, look, yeah, we agree. I'm talking about the other local boards.
Yes, absolutely, and we would engage with them to get their feedback.
Thank you.
Okay,
thank you, Chair.
Councillor Penrose?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, team, for the item today. As the mover of the recommendations at the hearing panel, that we adjourned this till 2:17. For reasons being that, one, I feel in my view that it's too close to an election, and it'll just cause confusion, but more in particular, I want to make sure that the electors are at the table through this process, and I can't see any reason why it would create a problem, even though there's only 2 that have shown an indication that they would not participate in it. We've got plenty of others at the table, as in members, as well as chairs. Because as we're looking at downsizing as opposed to increasing. So I don't think that's a problem at all. And as you know, Mr. Chair, we're at the forefront of this back in 2011, from memory. It really rolls on to the next part, because the DLC, it goes in conjunction with the LAP. And as we know, Mr. Chair, the LAP has been put on hold. Sadly, the judge passed away in January. We've been informed now that the LAP at this stage will not go forward until after the next election, sadly, because we're trying to give some certainty to the people of Auckland around the LAP, i.e. off licences, the freeze, and hours of operation across the region. And I've been advised that Christchurch is going to be second off the rank now, which saddens me, and probably the panel members as well. To the chair of the panel of the LAP, Councillor Cashmore, and George yourself, Councillor Crum and Glenn. There's a lot of hard work went into that, and I think that it's going to put things at risk. So to me it's about just tai-hoey,
let this go through to the next election and revisit it then.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
I'd like to second the recommendations and endorse what my colleague Councillor Penrose has said. I was present at the hearings committee when this was discussed. It's far better just to have that bit more time. Just on the subject of diversity, I think whenever we are selecting anybody for anything, I think we need a sentence, a preamble that says Auckland Council is committed to diversity. And that's age, gender and ethnic background. And if, you know, so it doesn't need to be part of the specifications, but it does need to be up there in lights.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Wilcox.
I think Councillor Penrose has asked the questions that I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I think that's Councillor Watson.
Yeah, no, I was just listening to the presentation of the Mangere Otahu local board and having a look, they felt option 2 was the one that appealed to them, and particularly as a local board that's been right at the forefront of this. When you actually look through the pros and cons comparisons of the various options, and certainly bearing in mind what Marguerite said about the willingness of officers to work with either of those, it strikes me that it's actually option 2 which provides a greater degree of momentum. I don't think it's necessarily a requirement to fit it in with the electoral cycle, given the amount of work that's gone into this and the high priority it's had during this term. You know, in some ways, a case could be mounted for actually making an attempt to maintain that momentum and complete that work or advance that work as far as possible in this term, rather than putting things on hold for, you know, the best part of 6 months or whatever it is, or perhaps more, and then picking it up again. I also note that, you know, the selection panel in option 2 appears to cater for that broader cross-section of perspectives that's been signalled by the local board as being so important. So I would say, Mr. Chair, looking at the various options and comparing the two, that it's actually option 2 that would best meet the needs, particularly in these areas where this issue is an ongoing concern for the community. And I don't think a hesitation, what's the saying, he who hesitates is lost, not quite that, but it's slowing down a momentum that's been built up. So I'll be supporting option 2.
Thank you. Well, with that, I'll put the motion, and we've added D, endorse the submission of the Mangere Otahu and Otara Papatoe local boards around the criteria for district licensing committee selection. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
No.
I declare that carried. Thank you. We now move to item 12. Thank you, the officers. Thank you very much. Thank you. 12.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is what we're here today to just go through the submission on the freshwater reforms document, the consultation document that came out through MFE recently. And a little bit of a background on this, it's following on from the National Policy Statement for Freshwater. It's the process we're going through at a national level, looking at freshwater reform, and it is another step in the process. We still have lots of involvement within the Land and Water Forum and other areas. For this particular document, I'm going to hand across to my colleague here, Andrew Miller, and he'll run through a presentation on what this document is about. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg and Chair. I'll just briefly run through what the government's proposed reforms are. They're part of a package that they foreshadowed several years ago in their ongoing reforms. Some of them relate to changes to the National Policy Statement for Freshwater. Others would be introduction of regulations or guidance and or changes to the RMA. Can we progress to the next slide? Yep, I got that, okay. Okay, so Number one is the proposed changes to the National Policy Statement for freshwater. There's an appendix that gives exemptions for significant infrastructure. So it'd be up to the government to consider applications for those exemptions, and they're asking what evidence would need to be provided in those types of applications. The MCI is the Macro Invertebrate Community Index. They're proposing there that it be a mandatory requirement to use the MCI, which is a measure of ecological health of the water body. Intermittently closing and opening lakes and lagoons. At the moment, there's a question of whether these predominantly large lagoons in some of the parts of the South Island are covered by marine or freshwater rules. So here it's proposed that the opening and closing lakes and lagoons be treated as freshwater bodies. In the MPS at the moment, there's a requirement to maintain or improve overall water quality within the region, and there's been a bit of discussion about what that actually means, how it would be, how you would do that. And so the proposal here is that it be, rather than within the region, it be maintain or improve overall water quality within a freshwater management unit, which would be basically probably a much smaller catchment-based area. Stock exclusion regulation, so there's a proposal there to introduce a national regulation that related to the exclusion of stock from freshwater bodies to improve water quality outcomes. There's a range of proposals that relate to economic use of fresh water in relation to providing guidance and the like. Fourthly, rights and interests. There's a suite of proposals that relate to that. Tamana OTYs are a concept that was introduced to the MPSFM in the 2014 amendment to the MPSFM, and here a proposal is just to provide more context about the meaning of Tamana OTY. The second is a proposal for rohi agreements, iwi agreements with councils on a catchment sort of area basis. Integration of water conservation orders with planning processes. Water conservation orders are a tool that exists in the Act, whereby a group can ask the government to establish rules in relation to a particular water body that's of national significance. We don't have any in Auckland. There are about 14 or so nationally since this tool was introduced. The last point there on iwi rights is funding for marae infrastructure. The government proposing to provide some funding for improving infrastructure on marae and papakainga, which are housing developments. Did I just miss one there? Yeah, and changes to freshwater funding. So there's a fund for retiring farmland around to improve water quality, and there's some proposals to make changes to that. So the general direction of the submission is to support the proposals for the significant infrastructure. Some of the criteria that we propose is to recognise the community health and wellbeing benefits of those types of infrastructure. We support including the MCI as a mandatory requirement for monitoring ecological health, but as a guideline value rather than a attribute that has a limit on it. That would provide, I guess, consistency in terms of some of the attributes that we have in the NOF, the National Objectives Framework, measure specific water quality parameters, but they don't give a measure of the ecological health of the water body as a whole. Supporting the overall improvement of water quality within an FMU rather than a region for practicality reasons. Supporting the stock exclusion proposal for national regulations, provided that we have the ability to pursue the regional rules that are more specific to our region. Recognising urban issues and water-sensitive urban design in terms of guidance and improving efficiency. And we're proposing that we support relationship-based iwi agreements rather than the legislative requirements of the rohi agreements, which is consistent with the approach that was promoted for the council submission on the resource management legislation bill that was recently before council for submissions to the government. Supporting funding for improvements in water infrastructure for marae and papakainga. There are a number of marae in the Auckland region that are outside the municipal supply area, and some of those marae would benefit from improving their water infrastructure. And lastly, regarding the funding, recognising improvements in urban freshwater quality rather than just retiring farmland. Thanks.
Questions? Councillor Cashmore, and I see the rural advisory panel have got some views here. So, Councillor.
Mr. Chairman, not so much of a question. I've got some thoughts I'd like to share, if that's appropriate. So everyone wants better water quality, there's no question about that, and I support this submission, and there's a few alterations from what's in the printed document before you, but this is a step on a journey, and one of the challenges we have is it's probably going to be quite a long journey and a very, very expensive journey. Water quality is not just a rural issue, it's also a massive urban issue. We do not have one urban water body that meets the baseline tests in this city. So the cost of mitigating that and fixing the stormwater is massive, in the billions. And so using the MCI indexes, which it's a good starting point, and the officers talked about it as it's an indicator. It's not a hard line. If you think about stormwater in your areas where it flows from an urban environment along a roadside or a rural roadside, then it flows through an actual built-up area, then it goes into a market gardening area or an orchard. How do you measure who supplies what contaminants in and out? It's very complex and probably virtually impossible. And one would have to question the work that's been done, funded by central government, about MCI indexes and where it's level, but that's a question we have to put to the government perhaps. And when we look at the exemptions and timelines, well, 95 to 96% of intensively farmed livestock in the Auckland region are already exempted and are already from waterways. They are excluded now. So we're getting there pretty quickly. Where we have some complications and where that was recognised in the proposed Auckland unitary plan work that the Rural Advisory Panel did last term, was about how we actually do the steeper and harder country. And best management practices was the results that we came out with that. And we had a roundtable discussion with all the NGOs, Forest and Bird, Fish and Game, DOC. There was 8 different organisations that came along. And what I thought would be a very, very set of contentious discussions was all over in 45 minutes. So they said, we actually think your proposal that you're putting in through the unitary plan, Auckland Council, is a good one. So I think we need to be a real emphasis that we are consistent with our unitary plan submissions and our proposals going forward, but the flexibility is built in to this submission to reinforce that. The other issue is the economic use and the good practice not only applies to rural but also applies to urban, and that's where you talk with Craig McElroy, and the challenges around stormwater are not insubstantial at all, whether it's new greenfields or old legacy town centres and suburbs. It is massive work, massively expensive. And perhaps the last comment I make, Mr Chairman, is to do with iwi rights under this legislation, under the RMA. It's going to be politically contentious. Most of you would have already seen some of the comment floating around about this. And I strongly support this council's approach, which is about having agreements with iwi, so a combined understanding of where we're headed and where we want to go and how we're going to get there. You know, the level of the iwi involvement should be agreed and consistent and practical within timelines. And it should be in terms of consultation and not a predeterminant for a consent, granting or not. And those levels of iwi involvement should be resourced by central government, and there should be national standards about how they're implemented if we're going to make this thing work. So in conclusion, Mr Chairman, the staff have done a good job of the submission. I was with them at the Minister's presentation at Ellerslie Racecourse 2 weeks ago. It's a very complex issue, and anyone simplifying it down to think it's purely about chasing a few dairy cows out of a creek is not doing this work justice. There's a lot to it. It's going to take a lot of time. And as the staff have indicated, we need the flexibility and the pragmatism to deliver what is the best results and the most affordable results for this city and this region. Thanks, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Casey, did you wish to?
Yeah, it was just, I read the submission. There was just one thing I wanted to suggest, that we're in a unique case in Auckland because we've got polluted streams, but they're going to get better through the Central Interceptor. But the Central Interceptor message is buried in the middle of this under Action 6, and I wondered if we should, I know they always ask us questions and we respond, but at the beginning we should say, here's the state of play, we've got this number of waterways, we've got huge pollution, we've got huge issues, and we've got the Central Interceptor coming. My next point is that there's Central Interceptor creep here again. I watch that end date with great interest every time I see a document, and my latest is 2023 with work starting in 2017. Yours is 2018 and finishing in 2024. Where did you get that from?
So, yeah, thank you, Councillor Casey, through you, Chair. I used the information that we had in the previous submission to the MPSFM reforms, which Watercare had provided me with, and through this formulating the submission, I fed that information back to Watercare, and they advised me that the dates had changed. Yeah, I learnt that through them when I gave them a draft submission. They asked me to alter the date, so I reflected what they told me based on the information they gave me.
Thank you. Councillor Darby?
Thank you. Can we just get a definition of what freshwater is, what it encompasses?
So water's defined in the Act, the Resource Management Act, and it talks about water, talks about coastal water and wastewater. So water in pipes, tanks and cisterns isn't considered to be water. And then it speaks about geothermal water, and that's from memory based on probably chemical composition and temperature, and coastal water, and the rest is fresh water.
So then, therefore, fresh water includes water from aquifers?
Yeah, most definitely. Lakes, rivers, streams, groundwater, aquifers, if you'd like to call them that. Yeah.
So why, when you take out, say, the potable waters that might come from aquifers, there's not a lot of reference here to aquifer water. One of the things that fascinates me, Chair, is that we place an economic value on everything else that comes out of the ground, the gas, the oil, and we license it, and government clips the ticket on it, and we don't seem to put an economic value on water and the extraction of water, be it from reservoirs, rivers, lakes, or aquifers. And I'm just wondering, have we canvassed that thought of saying to government there really needs to be a value on water? I'm not suggesting that we jump to the conclusion that every gallon that comes out of the ground has got a cents per litre charge on it. But there doesn't seem to be an understanding of the economic value of water by way of attaching some kind of value to it, like we do other resources. Do you get my drift? Well, have you cast your mind to that?
Sure. I would say the national policy statement talks about values of fresh water, not only financial but ecological and social and cultural values, and they all need to be reflected in the implementation. And as far as this proposed reform goes, they talk about economic use of fresh water, improving the economic use of fresh water through providing guidance, not only in terms of efficient use of all those types of fresh water you talk about, stream and or river aquifers, in the rural setting in terms of, say, irrigation, but also in terms of the urban setting in terms of municipal use. So that is in there. They talk about it in the discussion document, and I guess the closest to part of it, the document that refers to financial value would be the transferability of water permits, and they speak about that in terms of recognising that water has a value and that the greatest value of water in financial terms, I guess, to some degree, would be achieved through a system of transferability of water permits where the highest value of water would bubble to the surface, if it were. And so you can transfer water at the moment, and we've recognised that in the submission, but they're speaking of improving the system of being able to transfer water through highlighting where people have surplus water and the like. So I think it is covered there. It is probably...
So through the chair, look, there is a lot of discussion around the value and the rights and ownership around water at a national level going on at the moment. And as Councillor Cashmore pointed out before, actually the value we're going to have to put on it within an urban context is going to be significant because of the cost of fixing it up in our urban areas. So that is part of the national discourse, absolutely. It is.
So there might be some consideration about the charging of water like we do other resources that come out of the ground. And I'm sure there's exclusions to that, like customary rights to water. And I'm not jumping to the conclusion that we're going to charge for potable water for somebody that's got a bore and they're in some remote community and they rely upon that. I'm talking about the commercial extraction. So there is some thinking, because we're not submitting on that. No. Is it of value to submit on that, to get that conversation sponsored?
Well, those conversations are happening at the Land and Water Forum, so at those levels they are, and also around the most economic use of that. I know if you look across the country, you look at the varying uses of water, the power companies versus tourism and primary production. There's lots of discussions in that space.
Okay, I'll leave that there. Look, a lot of this I support, and I'm happy to move or second to whoever's leading this body of work can move. I'm happy to see recognition of the ecological, like freshwater ecology rather than just freshwater in isolation, and marrying up that relationship. I think if we just talk about water quality, we miss that overall picture of what water quality allows for. So I think embedding that in there is important. I think you've captured it well. And of course, water quality has to be life-supporting to get those ecological outcomes. But the third bullet point on A48, which is your page 3 of your submission, it's on our page 48. Maybe it's the third bullet point. It's got stream ecological valuation at the top, and we come down to enhancing freshwater values where there is a change to an urban land use. Why do you think we need the words "and where practicable"? Don't we have all the thinking at our disposal to actually enhance freshwater values, whatever the change in the land use is? Don't we have everything at our disposal now? It feels like an out. It feels like an excuse to do poorly.
Through the chair, hopefully that's not the intent. But one of the situations we do have within an urban context, and if we look internationally, it is an evolving process. So we have a lot of water sensitive design, and we have a lot of innovation in this space, and then it needs to be tested to see through. When you urbanise a catchment, you will have an impact. That is a sort of a given, and there's nothing around the world that has shown there's been an absolute panacea to solving those impacts that you do have. Essentially where the practicality comes about it, essentially.
Okay, look, I just want to express, I think, I don't know, look, I'm not going to wordsmith this at this stage, but I think that needs to be a bit stronger. Now, if we go to stock exclusion, what is our submission on that? I'm reading the Rural Advisory Panel's information, but what is our specific point on stock exclusion? We've got something in the proposed Auckland Unitary Plan, and that talks about barriers from memory. It didn't talk about fencing. It talked about barriers, but you could probably refresh us there. What are we supporting in our submission on stock exclusion, knowing that it is a big issue for Auckland, and of course we are connected to the Firth of Thames and the Hauraki Gulf, and we know all the data there that we've got massive nitrogen gains. They're not slowing down, and there is a big issue that we're facing. Otherwise we're going to see just decimation of the ecology of the Hauraki Gulf. So are we saying this is a big issue, or are we kicking it for touch?
We're saying it's an issue and that we support the introduction of the regulations that the government proposes. And my understanding is that the government would then draft some regulations, and then they would be put out for submissions. So they'll come out with some detail about proposed regulations, and then there'll be an opportunity to review and look at those. We support the introduction of national regulations, one, and we also support that we should be able to introduce our own regionally specific stock exclusion rules that relate to our region. So we'd like to retain the requirement that if there's a national regulation, that we can also have local rules that apply in our region as well.
Sorry, just one last question, Chair. So if there is a national rule, normally that's the that's the maximum. That's how it gets interpreted. So what do you mean when there might be, say, district or regional or unitary councils like ours with other rules?
So an example, there's a regulation relating to measuring water takes. That's an existing regulation, and it says that everyone has to measure a water take that's greater than, say, 250 cubic metres a day. The council could say, well, actually, we'd like to have rules that require measuring water for less than that, 50 cubic metres a day. So they would be more specific rules that had, I guess, a greater onus than the national regulation.
Okay, and lastly, so Councillor Cashmore said there are some changes to this, but what are the changes? Can you just, with some brevity, just say what the changes are?
Perhaps I can make a comment there in terms of the grazing or the stock exclusion issues. Generally was to recognise that the measures that have been developed through the PORP had been through a collaborative process and had recognised a number of specific outcomes that could be better reflected. And so maybe it's just a case of saying we just wanted to make sure that in supporting the national regulations that we don't want to lose sight of the fact that there's been quite a bit of work done in this region with the particular issues in this region to actually identify some alternative or supplementary measures that would improve water quality through that. process.
So through the Chair, what we've tried to do is we've been following a national director on this to be very collaborative and build these coalitions where we can discuss all these things. So if we've come up with agreements in Auckland that fit well with the communities, everyone's happy with them, and they set timeframes, that would be a little bit problematic for us to that get usurped, and then we have to, and so that sort of breaks up all the goodwill. So that's sort of something that we're pushing in here. So we're following your national process. Let's sort of adhere to what the outcomes of that are instead of coming over and maybe usurping that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. The first one is the exclusion again of stock from water bodies. I suppose what I'm asking is, I don't see anything there about the cost that will be, who will bear that cost in our submission.
Yeah, there isn't anything there that relates to in the submission about costs. So the proposal that the government's put forward in these reforms and to bring in a regulation were based on work that the Land and Water Forum did. So the Land and Water Forum's a body that the government supports. It's made up of various parties, NGOs, federated farmers and the like. They came out with a proposal, and I'm sure that they would have considered in their proposal the costs. They put forward a proposal for excluding stock from waterways by certain dates. That proposal has been picked up by the government and reflected in this reform document. And in that regard, like I say, the government or the would have considered the cost. We haven't considered costs or done a costing exercise. Basically said that we support the proposal that the government has promoted and been developed by the players, basically.
Yeah, okay. We have 5 kilometres of fencing if we're to fence off our streams. It will be broke tomorrow if that was to happen, just to say. And the second one regarding that is there's a longer lead-in for big animals. Are we saying a pig's a big animal, or where do we go? Is it sheep, or was this been already defined by the government?
Yeah, that's right. So in the reform document, there's a table. They identify a number of different types of animals. The stock that they identify are deer, pigs, cattle.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I suppose my issue with that is that we're not recognising that this will come at a cost to the Auckland economy, because farmers are part of the Auckland economy, $2 billion worth.
So through the Chair, that is something that we're looking at in the context of Auckland, and we're looking at the context of like, how are we going to look at some of these, what they call FMUs, our catchments, and what are the best options for us to do that. So internally we are taking into account that and seeing where the balance lies, but we haven't landed on that yet, but it's not something that we're totally ignoring.
I think I would also just quickly add that as Andrew indicated before, a lot of these proposals came out of recommendations to the Land and Water Forum, but equally the Dairying Accord as well, with some of the bigger milk producers. So there's been quite a lot of debate and discussion about these things, and costs would have been considered as part of that discussion in the last few years.
Thank you. Councillor Quacks.
I had one more.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Go on.
Yeah, so my other one is we're supporting here arrangements with iwi as opposed to the legislative process. And I suppose we can say that in Auckland because we have quite good relationships with a lot of the iwi. But this is a national program. Are we recognising that in other areas, I mean, Māori don't even get a walk in the door? So, I mean, we can explain the Auckland situation, but we should remember that nationally it may be totally different. And are we recognising that in our discussion? You know, do you think you've recognised that? where legislation is required for some.
Well, not in our submission. We haven't had feedback along those lines about the impact on iwi outside of our region in this context. But we do know that the Iwi Leaders Forum has been involved in the land and water forum processes and where these things have come out from. So we do have confidence that that has been discussed and it's not being left out.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, it is about arrangements with iwi. I sometimes get a little bit concerned that we're talking often to people who don't have the ability or capacity to understand what's happening. I'm not saying that iwi in Auckland can't, but I have to say that for my land, I will talk for my land, not iwi. So I would be very upset if we were to talk to iwi about my land, just as I suppose a lot of other people are. But I mean, especially for Māori land, there is another class of Māori land, in Auckland that is owned by Māori, and we would all have this same opinion that we will decide what is best for our land, and an arrangement made with council wouldn't, with a third party like an iwi group, we would be very concerned about. Have we thought about that?
I'd just note that the intent of this reform here is that it's up to the iwi to initiate the agreement with the council, and that it would be very much in the case of iwi's hands in talking to their own constituency about how far their mandate would go. And I think you would like to think that they would also think about the individual views of their own constituents. So, I think that's probably the key point to note here, is that this is about a vehicle that they may wish to utilise as an iwi, that don't have to, but it's there as an option for them. And then when they do decide to initiate any agreement with the council, then it would be a case of what would the mandate be in terms of how they relate to the council.
Okay, councillors, we've arrived at 12:30. We were going to stop at 12:30 for lunch. Is that the wish of the councillors, and then come back after lunch, or do you want to finish?
Keep going. Finish it off.
Well, I've got two more speakers on this, and then we've got two more items to go. Okay, well, we'll go Councillor Quacks and Councillor Lee. Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm just, I picked up on what Councillor Cashmore said before. So I understand that we're suggesting that, or in the submission, that we don't agree with iwi participating in the planning of freshwater use, but we do agree that they should be consulted like any other party. Is that what we're saying?
So, through the chair, I think, just to clarify, the consultation element that Councillor Cashmore was raising was more in light of how they input into consenting arrangements. I think that was more a feature of how that's done at a more operational level. So there's that aspect, but I think the other thing is that the involvement of Maori is very clearly an element of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater.
Well, yeah, I know it is, and because they're actually asking that council find a way to that Maori iwi can participate in the planning. That's right, isn't it? They say that that iwi should council should show how iwi may participate in planning. And when you talk about planning, planning and consultation are two entirely different things. If you have a group that is going to be involved in planning, another group that's going to be involved in planning, apart from the bureaucracy backed up or endorsed, and that's endorsed by the elected members, that's one thing. But to arrange or to organise or to have another group participate in that planning process adds cost, complexity, the possibility of corruption, of endless delays. So I find it difficult to agree that we should agree that Maori would be involved in the planning. Maori should be involved, or iwi should be involved in consultation like any other part of our community, but I find it difficult to acquiesce to the idea that we would have another group of unelected people involved in the planning, and it just doesn't make sense in how we can deliver better freshwater quality, because that's what it's all about, by having an extra layer of another group involved in that, which really aren't accountable to anyone. So I want to make that point, because it's the government have said no one owns the water, no one, and that's I guess that's always been the case. No one does own the water. But what I see here is not so much a matter of who owns the water, but who controls the water. And control, if that is held by one group of people, that is dangerous, and that is akin to owning the water, in my view.
So just perhaps to clarify, that the nature of the feedback sought through this process is more about providing a bit more clarification about how iwi rights and interests are expressed, and so it's actually providing some sort of clarity to a number of other parties as to what is the extent of their rights, or sorry, not the extent, but the
interest.
How their interest is expressed, and so that so as a council, there's the ability for council officers and councillors to engage with iwi in such a way that they know kind of what their values and principles are for a particular water body. So this is sort of talking about trying to better make that explicit as to how some of those interests can be recognised.
I think this is consistent with our previous submission, isn't it, in relation to the the resource legislation amendment bill?
Yes, I think that's another. There's two things. One would be, firstly, that the council's position on the mechanism that's been proposed here, and our response to that is very much along the same lines as what was the council put through to the resource amendment legislation. Secondly, is that a number of the issues about how iwi are sort of involved, of course, are set out in the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management already, and these are just sort of some enhancements to actually provide better clarity as to how that should be made more visible or more explicit as to how that's going to be working in an operational sense.
Okay, Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the recommendations and the submission. By and large, I do have a couple of questions, and they relate to freshwater management units. How defined are these freshwater management units presently across the Auckland region, given there's a choice posed in the discussion paper between overall regional improvements or freshwater management unit improvements? How well are these defined across Auckland now?
Through the chair, we've currently defined them around the catchments, so around the consolidated receiving grounds, the harbours. So that's where we've broken them down. It's more manageable there. We can understand how the catchment flows. So that's where they've broken down to, and it gives us a lot more.
Could I get later get some information about? Sure, thank you.
Absolutely.
The second thing is that it's kind of curious that the government went to the trouble of getting together a national policy statement after much deliberation, discussion and so on, and to come back and wanting to change it. And I think we have to be aware that there is an ambiguity running through this work, and that is trying to offset the increased pressure for more exploitation, commercial exploitation of fresh water, and offset that with the quite contradictory, on the face of it, aspirations, expectations, demands by the wider public, and real concerns at the degradation of water across the country. And so there is this ambiguity and trying attempts by the government to try and balance it, which I don't know if it's achievable, and I think we should, if possible, stick to basic principles of improving water quality, full stop. The other balancing act that's obviously apparent through this document is the political needs of the government and its relationship with iwi, and at political level the Maori Party. And so a lot of this stuff is not really about water quality at all. It's almost about constitutional changes and power. And I think that we need to be very careful about departing from established Resource Management Act principles in terms of consultation with mana whenua. That doesn't mean to set up a number of different little governments across New Zealand, and that's the real danger if we keep on going down this path. All very well do people have aspirations to control water. Another thing altogether when people want to flip the ticket over water, whoever they may be, and I think that is a real concern. So I support the submission, but I would prefer that we, our approach was more straightforward, and not to buy in to the inherent ambiguity through this draft policy statement. For instance, my last point, question 2. In the Auckland, our response to question 2 is as ambiguous as anything the government could concoct, and I would prefer that that answer to question 2 was a lot more straightforward, and actually, rather than talking about supports the flexibility to maintain water quality, blah, 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 it should be about maintaining and improving water quality on behalf of the people of Auckland. Thank you very much.
Thank you. With that, no other speakers. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Declare the motion carried. Thank you. We now move to item 13, which is the update on the Regional Strategy and Policy Committee Work Programme. And Sanchez here. We'll take it as read.
Completely mad.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Chair. One report that I thought was coming in June was the smoke-free policy review. Now, I can't see that listed here, or am I not reading it? We'll wait for the officer to look. So that's something that I want to question. My understanding it was due in June. It's already been delayed, so the status of that?
We'll go back and check on where that's landed and why it's not in here if it was supposed to be.
Okay, so it's currently not there, and it's not my place to go and move a motion that we have an expectation, because that's a bit of a mess. So there is an expectation that this is coming in June and it's already been delayed. So the fact that it's not there worries me. So can we get maybe a quick memo to all councillors when that report is due? Unless there's information here now, and I don't think there is.
There's not, but we can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll do for that, sorry, councillor Casey, sorry.
How do we get information about the weed management political advisory group? I'm really interested in what advice we're receiving from them. You know how it's reported?
So you're talking about the Weed Management Political Advisory Group.
Line 20.
Yep.
Line
In
20.
contrast to the technical group.
No,
I understand this group has met. I'm interested
the eminent experts, you mean?
in... political advisory group, George, on page 59.
I can certainly confirm the group's met. There's certainly, there's a number here that are involved in that group. If you would like a summary report for information only, we could include a note to that effect to strategy and policy.
Through the Chair, there is also a memo going out to participants of that group, I understand, as a result of the meeting that was held earlier this year.
Sorry, okay, councillor Penrose.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Mr Chair. I just want to, I don't want to relitigate what I said before, but it's just a forward work program on the LAP. And I just want to flag that that was alarming and concerning. It's no fault of the panel nor the council as to why we're in this predicament at the moment. And it is concerning that we're not able now to proceed, and we're hoping to complete this process by October 2016. And as mentioned before, I think that puts Auckland in quite some an alarming area. Where, as mentioned, you know, we wanted to get this process put in place so we could mitigate some of the concerns that not only the local boards had, or we have, but Aucklanders have. But we are convening a meeting between the panel members as to where from here, so just want to flag that, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Mr Wilcox.
Yeah, just on local harm reduction strategy, I looked at it, that's coming through the community development and thing, is that what CDS stands for? Yeah. When will that come back to us, or will that be like quite a while yet? Oh.
I didn't hear your first, the alcohol harm reduction? Okay. We don't have a date on that, but all of the dates in here that aren't confirmed we will be chasing up. In any new items, including smoke-free, if they're not reflected here, we will, with notification, report back to you by memo.
Thank you. With that, I'll move the
I'll second.
recommendation, seconded by councillor Casey. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against, declare that carried. And we now move to item 14, which is information.
Happy to move that.
Moved by councillor
Second.
Penrose, seconded by councillor Casey. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against, declare that carried. I'll now declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
Move.
Oh, that's the one we just did, right?
No, there's two.
Oh, okay, I'll move item 15.
Second.
Seconded by councillor Philippine. I'll put that motion. Those in
Aye.
favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Now close the meeting. There's lunch downstairs.
Good cheering, Mr Chair.
Oh, yeah, you're right.